Baiju Bhatt, welcome to the show.
What's up, man?
Oh man, I'm excited about this
Me
one.
too.
I'm really excited about this one. But I want to dive right into this. I'm sorry I cut you off on that conversation. We got to have this on the show.
Yeah.
But you were looking at the bar over there and asking, if people drink on the show, and I said no. I haven't had a drink in over 3 years now. I did the psychedelics thing, and you had brought up that there seems to be like a movement of the younger generation just booze doesn't have a place. And I think that's a good thing, but you brought up a good point.
Yeah. So I feel like the contrary take here is that alcohol's kind of gone out of vogue in society. I think especially with young people, and it's kind of like at the same time that we see like a precipitous drop in socializing, romance, all this stuff for the younger generation, right? And like, I actually think I was making this point earlier. I think alcohol is a very important part of human society. I think it's a very important social lubricant. And like, yeah, my contrarian view on it is alcohol is actually really important.
That's an interesting concept. You're the only one that I've ever heard say that. But I don't know. I'm in my 40s now, so I don't know how young people are socializing. Unless I go to downtown Nashville on Broadway, then
Then you see it.
there's no shortage of alcohol there. But I wonder, how are people socializing that don't drink nowadays?
On the internet?
That's
Or
what it seems.
are they not socializing? I don't know. I mean, I think this is like a broader thing, right? Is like the era that we grew up in, went to college, went to high school, all this stuff. There weren't phones around, right? You'd get bored. You'd have to like sit and think about shit to entertain yourself, right? That whole thing, like long form thinking, like being bored. Yeah, and alcohol was like the universal social lubricant when I was in my early 20s, right?
Yeah, me too. I think it started at like 13. But yeah, that's all.
But what happens if you get rid of it, right? Is like you have a lot of people that probably just socialize a lot less.
It's got to be replaced with something. Unfortunately, you're probably right. It's probably replaced with
I think it's
Instagram and X and
Yeah, I think it's social media.
damn.
Yeah, I don't think that's great. I don't think the human brain is wired like that, right? We are social animals. Like we're animals, right? We're creatures that take on the human form, but we're an incredibly social species, and it's weird if that sort of gets replaced or like augmented in a way that doesn't line up with how our brains work with the internet.
People say the same thing about cigarettes too.
Wait, do they?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to smoke. You never smoked?
I've smoked.
Yeah. You step outside of the bar and you talk to the other people that are smoking. Now I feel like I'm condoning cigarettes and alcohol, which is absurd for this show.
I mean, like living in New York in my early 20s, right? If you go outside and have a cigarette with somebody, like there's
a connection.
yeah, you make friends, right?
Yeah. Or at work or anywhere.
Yeah. Although I think nicotine, cigarettes, I think are bad for you. Like, I think it makes it hard to breathe. It's like probably going to give you cancer someday.
Well, I think, on the flip side with the alcohol, all the broken homes, and drinking with excess.
Yeah.
And I think it's ended a lot of relationships as well. I know in my prior relationships, you get to tug on the bottle a little bit too much and everything goes off the rails. But that's me.
I had the benefit of being Indian. My body just can't really handle alcohol. Yeah.
Oh shit.
One of the nice things. Yeah. Like I could never. In college, I would like to have thought that I could drink, but I don't think I could really hold my alcohol that well. We're also talking about studying math and physics at Stanford, which let me tell you about that party culture.
Tell me about it.
There's a lot of really late nights of doing problem sets. Like all-nighter after all-nighter of doing problem sets.
Not your typical college experience, huh?
They're like living in the physics building at Stanford, right? Or spending all night in the math library at Stanford. And just like these dimly lit rooms where you're like smelling the musk of an old textbook. That was my college experience.
Nice. Well, we got a lot to talk about
We
today.
do, man.
A ton to talk about. So let me start you off with an introduction here. Baiju Bhatt, son of immigrants who grew up in Virginia with a passion for science sparked by her father's work at NASA's Langley Research Center. A Stanford educated physicist and mathematician who co founded Robinhood alongside your college roommate Vlad Tenev. This no fee trading app revolutionized the brokerage industry and shook up Wall Street, earning you an Apple Design Award in 2015 for its user friendly design, navigated Robinhood through turbulent waters, including the GameStop trading halt and SEC settlements. Recently, you founded Aetherflux, a bold new venture aiming to harness solar energy from space and beam it to Earth. It's, I love that. I just like I was telling you before, we just had this guy, Steve Quast, on, and he was talking about beaming energy to the earth.
Yeah.
And it was so far out there. I'm like, is this shit actually like real? And now here you are, you're legitimately doing it.
Yeah.
So, husband, father of three boys, and you appreciate craftsmanship, hardware, product design. You're passionate about watches and cars. What are your favorite cars?
Oh man. So I got a car kind of recently, which I love. Love this thing. It's a 1992. I like my cars old. First of all, I like my cars old and stinky.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I got this 1992 Porsche 911 RS in mint green.
Nice.
Hunting for this car for years. I finally found it.
Where'd you find it?
I think it was in Germany.
Damn, that's awesome.
Yeah, this thing is cool. So I got into to talk a little bit about building shit with our hands. So during COVID, this was kind of a wild time for me at least. And I think for everybody it was wild, but we're all like stuck at home. And here I am like trying to lead Robinhood. So at the time, Vlad and I were co-CEOs of the company, trying to lead this enterprise from like my home office, right? And you're just like in this little vortex of your own world the whole time. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I need a creative outlet. Like I've always been this way where there's the main thing that I care about that's kind of like the main thing that my energy is going towards. And there's always like a creative muse or a creative outlet or something that's completely unrelated to the work that I'm doing, which is like a passion or a hobby. And I find that that's usually where a lot of the creativity is all about connecting unrelated ideas together, right? And seeing the threads that connect things that maybe you don't necessarily see if you just look at things very plainly. For me during COVID, I was like, man, I've been building technology, digital technology for years and years, coming on 10 years at that point. And I kind of wanted to try my hand at building stuff, like actual stuff. So I'm like, I know how to build technology, but I don't really feel like I know how to build mechanical material things. So I was like, all right, I also love cars because I grew up in Virginia and I had to drive all fucking time because I was taking classes at like a community college where I was like doing some research at this particle accelerator, which meant I had to just drive around all the time. So I loved cars. And I was like, if I want to get into classic cars someday. And I convinced myself that the way that I was going to do it was start out by building a car first.
No kidding?
Yeah.
What'd you build?
So are you familiar with this company called Factory 5?
No.
All right. Very cool company. They build kit cars that are like basically like reimaginations of like Shelby race cars. So they've got the Shelby Cobra that they make. And then the one that I did is the hardtop version of it. So the Shelby Daytona. So during COVID, I had never done this before. I ordered one of these kits, got connected to a couple of people that sort of were like my automotive mentors in the early days and kind of taught me how to do it. But during COVID, in my nights and weekends and whatever spare time I had, I go from a box of parts to like like a thing that
That's
turned
awesome.
on. Yeah.
Did you find that difficult? Or did it come naturally to you?
I like difficult things. So I did find it to be difficult for sure. But that was That's kind of like that's the rite of passage in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember I found myself a couple of times because there's also COVID, right? And so
There's not much to do.
there's not much to do. There's also not a lot of people that can help you do shit. So I remember finding myself a couple of times like it's like, all right, it's Saturday. What am I doing today? I'm gonna figure out how to mount this damn fuel tank onto this car. And I remember finding myself sort of on one of those little sliders underneath the car and like trying to prop the thing up on my legs and trying to screw it in. You become like a contortionist trying to build this stuff.
When was that?
This is during COVID.
How many class of cars do you have now?
Had a couple classes. Yeah.
Awesome.
My thing is I love the way that things work, and I think that that experience was super interesting because you kind of go from like loving cars to being able to really be like, okay, the thing that I really like about cars is like the way that mechanical things working in a particular way. For example, right? Like I think cars sound really good. Love the sound of cars. But it's like, well, what does that mean? Like what part of the sound do you like, right? Do you like the exhaust note? Do you like the induction sound from the engine? Do you like the gears chattering? Because there's like, no sound deadening in the thing. Yeah, it's like getting a really deep understanding of all the components and being like, actually, and this is kind of one of the places that I've landed now. It's better to drive a slow car fast than to drive a fast car slow. So I actually kind of like my cars more underpowered, lightweight. So you gotta like really wring them out to actually keep up with traffic, for example.
Nice. I just got my first, I don't know if I'd call it a classic car, but
Yeah, are you in a car? Tell me. There's an engine sitting over there.
yeah, well, I'd love to talk about that on the air, but I can't. But for
There's an engine
obvious
sitting there.
reasons. But now I just got a 1977 Ford F-150.
Oh,
We were talking before. I grew up in Missouri. You were born there,
that was, yeah.
and that was like, they just don't make cars like they used to, man.
No.
I mean, even it's in. Yeah, I literally just picked it up last week. I love the damn thing. I'm putting some pipes on it because I like the exhaust sound.
What kind of engine does it have?
A 351.
Nice. Yeah. I love old cars. Yeah, cars today are all right, I'm gonna go on a bit of a limb here. They're like kind of perverted in my opinion. Because I think of cars as these objects of industrial design, right? I think of them as these things that humanity invented for transportation, and there's like this artistic component to them because old cars were handmade, right? Mm-hmm. They were envisioned by the mind and built with the hand. And you look at the cars that exist today, number one, they're designed by computers, and they look like it, in my opinion. And they're built by robots. And just like the materials and the way that things fit together, there's something about it really, really don't like.
What do you think about?
That's why I say it's perverted.
I'm just curious. You know what I don't like is everything's going electric. Like, didn't Ferrari get rid of all of the? They're not doing engines anymore, right? It's all electric. I think so. And what? The Mercedes G-Wagon, those are getting ready to go all electric. And those things, I love the sound of those things.
Me too.
I used to drive them for work. And,
big burbly V8.
Yeah, love it. But everything's going electric, and I think the sound of like these supercars are amazing. I can't envision a Ferrari flying by me with
no sound.
Yeah. It's weird.
Hugely.
I feel like it takes from the experience.
Oh man, yeah, that's not good.
But
I find the not just the electrification, because that you can like very quickly point a finger to that and be like, I don't like the way that works. But I think just in general how computerized cars are.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it really takes away from the experience, because when I'm sitting behind the wheel of a car, like I want to be able to know what's going on with the road surface through the way the steering wheel's moving in your hand, right? You want to be able to feel how much traction the car's got based on how much you can kind of like feel it moving through your butt.
Dude, you drive, don't you?
I do, yeah.
Do you go to the track?
Not that much.
Have you taken driving schools?
I have, yeah.
Which ones?
I've had some people tutor me on it before.
Dude, you have.
No, actually, I've taken the Ferrari driving school once.
How
Yeah.
was it?
It was really fast. It was like too fast.
Dude, have you this is
Have you done it before?
Well, I've done a bunch of driving schools for back in the old days when I was a SEAL and contracting for CIA. They put us through a ton of schools.
Did they put you through the Ferrari school?
No. It was it was a lot more practical. It was like pitting and crashing into things and how to get out of situations. But I took this course. You've got to do this. Like you were talking about lighter cars, drive them faster. Mm-hmm. So there's this course in New Hampshire. It's called the O'Neill Rally Racing Course. Have you heard of it?
I love rally racing.
Dude, it is fucking awesome. I went there, and I think I went there for like 2 weeks. This is a long time ago, but you're out in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire, and day one, I think, is the first phase is front wheel drive, then you do rear wheel drive, then you do all wheel drive, then you do off roading, and you start off on little Ford Festivas and move to Audis and BMWs for rear wheel drive, and you're just on these little trails in the mountains out there. The trails are like,
well, you took BMWs on dirt roads?
dude, it's awesome. It's awesome. You've got to check this out.
Oh,
It's
this
like the
sounds
coolest
good.
fucking driving school I've ever taken. And yeah, like I said, I think it's about 2 weeks long. They got all kinds of different packages, but when my son gets older, that's one of the first things I want to do with him when he can see over the steering wheel, get him out there on those trails, and it's awesome. You'll love it. I hope you do it.
Yeah, I actually, as you're saying this, I'm thinking about wanting to do that with my boys. They would love that.
Yeah, O'Neill Rally Racing School. That's not a plug. It's just it's just
awesome.
fucking awesome.
Yeah. Also, off-roading is really fun.
Yeah, I mean it's
Really fun.
you do it all, and then you go there in the winter and do it in the snow. It's awesome. The instructors are phenomenal. I can't wait to do it again. But
Yeah, I would actually love to do that. So I've done one actual driving school, which is like the Ferrari one. Kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum, too fast. Like it makes you feel like you're gonna throw up the whole time.
really,
Yeah,
yeah, I've not done
off-roading
any of
is
those.
way more fun. Yeah.
This is it's a lot of fun, man. And you're moving through like these trails that are barely wide enough for the car to get through, taking right angle turns at like 50 miles. It's awesome. It is awesome.
Were there any like big old trucks on this one?
No, I think we used Jeep Cherokees for the off-roading. But like I said, this is like 10, 15 years ago that I did that course. I haven't taken a driving course since, but it was the most fun driving course I've taken, and I've taken a ton of them.
Yeah.
But well, everybody starts off with a gift here.
Oh, amazing.
Vigilance League gummy bears, legal in all 50 states.
Can I have some?
Yeah, man. Dig in. Just candy. It's no funny business.
Good stuff. I love gummy bears.
Me too. But well, I'd love to do a life story on you.
Yeah, let's do it.
So let's just start at the beginning and go in chronological order. But where'd you grow up?
So, grew up in Alabama and then in Southern Virginia. And I guess I was grown up by the time I got to college. So my family moves to the U.S. from India. My dad had grown up always wanting to study physics. So it was like his life goal. He wanted to study physics. And they're from a little town. I guess now it's a big town in India called Bhavnagar in Gujarat. And my grandfather, was one of the first Western trained eye doctors.
No
This
kid.
has got to be in like probably the 40s and 50s and 60s. He was one of the first Western trained eye doctors, and was like, my children are going to go into optometry. So this is like my dad and his brothers. So my dad had always wanted to study physics, goes to college to study chemistry, I want to say. I think he started a PhD in chemistry in India. and then stops doing that and is an optometrist. He's like a contact lens doctor in India, applying to PhD programs in America because he wanted to study physics. And the story that my dad tells me is that he put the word Kumar at the end of his name, which apparently means you're a bachelor, because he was like, I'm going to devote my life to science. My dad is like he's a very studious man, and I love him. But lo and behold, my dad, I think, eventually was like, all right, I'm going to get married. I think he was, I think he was maybe like, all right, maybe this coming to America to study physics thing isn't going to happen. So he gets married to my mom, and then she's pregnant with me, and then he gets into University of Huntsville, Alabama to study physics. And my mom originally, I think, was not going to come. 'Cause she was the youngest of a bunch of siblings. She really loved her family in India. And the story that they told me is that they go to the embassy in India, and my mom is pregnant with me, and they're like, "Oh, your son, you're pregnant, right?" And they're like, "Your son's going to be born in America." So my mom, much to her frustration, sorry, this is going back a little bit further, but I think it's
No, this is cool.
pretty relevant. She comes to America, and we grow up. So when she first lands in America, she's in Huntsville, or sorry, Huntsville, Alabama. Yeah, that's where my dad was studying physics. And I think they knew like one Indian family in America that were also doctors that were in Warrensburg, Missouri.
Right around where I grew up.
Yeah. And so my mom, the story goes, she goes out to Warrensburg right when she's about to give birth to me because you can't afford to go to the hospital for like a week, right? So she goes there, I'm born, and then she comes back to Alabama, which is where I grew up. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
It was
You still tight with both of your parents?
yeah, very much so.
Did you say your dad in the 40s or in his 40s?
No, when my grandfather studied,
Oh, okay.
which must have been in the 40s or 50s in India.
Okay. I was
Maybe
like,
maybe it was 50s or 60s. No, he was born in the 40s.
okay.
He wasn't in his 40s in the 40s.
Right on. Well, what were you into? What were you into growing up?
Yeah, so my childhood was I had a really loving family, but the circumstances were, I think, objectively pretty tough a lot of times. So this is like one of the pretty heavy duty things that happened in my life at a pretty young age. My dad's kidneys failed. Pretty much. I think it probably started around the time he came to the US. And so by the time I was 4 or 5, my dad had to stop out of his PhD program to get a job to pay for the medical bills. So here we are moving to a little town called Poquoson, Virginia, next to Langley Air Force Base, because my dad got a job at NASA Langley. And I think one of the big things for him was he's like, I have to get a job to pay for these medical bills because he started going on dialysis when I was like 5 years old. So there I was, only child, like not a lot of brown people around Southern Virginia. Yeah, and actually, interestingly, I didn't learn English until I was like maybe 4 or 5.
No kidding.
Yeah, I learned Gujarati was my first language. Because my mom didn't speak English. We learned English together. I learned English watching TV.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was kind of who I was as a kid when we got to Virginia. So what was I into as a kid? Really into superheroes. I was really into like cartoons and X-Men and comic books and stuff like that. I was also really into science and space, and that a lot of that came from my dad because he worked at NASA.
That's cool.
It's like, what does your dad do? He's a scientist at NASA, or something that I was always really proud of and I thought was very cool. And I remember I would go to visit my dad at work sometimes. And have you been to Langley Air Force Base?
No.
Yeah, there's these huge wind tunnels, right, that are kind of on the facility. And I remember going there as a kid and just being sort of awestruck by the machinery of like science and space, right? And like how big it was. And I remember my dad had he had like a desktop computer and he was doing computer stuff on, I think he was using Linux in like the 90s. So I distinctly remember going in, like my dad had his computer at his desk. So that was a lot of my childhood. I mean, I grew up not being a terribly athletic kid. I was actually quite overweight as a child,
You were overweight?
big time.
No kidding.
Yeah. I ended up losing a ton of weight when I got a little bit older. Like I lost like nearly a third of my body weight in high school.
Wow.
Yeah, from exercising.
Okay.
And so that was kind of my childhood, right? We were not terribly well to do. We lived in like a small apartment. My dad was a scientist at NASA. He was on dialysis. I was a little kid, I was like a little boy. And the point at which my life fundamentally changed was when I was in 8th grade, actually. And my dad had been on dialysis this whole time and was waiting to get a kidney transplant, like waiting year in, year out. I remember he had this little beeper that he would carry around with him. Just like, oh, did the beeper go off? Because if the beeper went off, it meant that one of the hospitals called because they had a kidney transplant for him. And you got to like pack up and go. And when I was in 8th grade, my dad's kidney disease kind of took a turn for the worse. So he was on dialysis and he got this infection. And I don't think they really understood what was happening at the time, but he got very, very sick from the catheter that was in his stomach, basically, for him to be able to do dialysis. And my dad goes from being sick to being very sick to being hospitalized to my mom being like every day waking up in the morning and going and staying with my dad at the hospital all day. And I was just kind of like home alone, just fucking confused,
Damn.
being like, what do I do? Right? Like, where does life go from here? Feels completely rudderless. Didn't have any siblings, right? I was not cool at all. I was like fat brown kid in school. Like there wasn't a lot of, I had a couple of friends. Actually one good friend from that period that's still a friend of mine. But I just remember feeling so unbelievably lost. And then my dad's health continues to take a turn for the worse. And he has a couple of really major surgeries where, at 13 or whatever it was, I remember staring down the specter of what happens if my dad passes away. By the way, my dad is healthy and alive today. So
Good.
probably worth saying that. I'm like, what happens, right? I want to go back to India. I've never lived there. My parents couldn't even afford to go back to India. The last time I went back to India was in 1997. 97, maybe 98.
Did you go back? Is that like the only time you went back to India, or did you go back and forth a couple times?
Probably when I was a little kid, I went like 2 or 3 times.
But you don't remember it?
Vague memories of it. But I'm an American, right? Like, through and through. So that's happening, and I'm like, well, what do I do, right? I don't feel like I can control anything in my life. But growing up in my household, it was like this theme will come back a little bit later on, right? Is like you have to make the most of the opportunities in life. And America is the land of opportunity. And my dad did beat one thing into my head, which is education, education, education. Like that's your way out. So I go from not being a terribly good student to being like, I'm going to get really good at math. I'm going to get really good at physics, because no matter what, like that'll give me some purpose in life. And if I'm doing really well in school, that'll be kind of like the thing that pulls me forward. Lo and behold, a few months later, my dad, his kidney disease that he had that had him hospitalized, which I'm talking about it kind of vaguely because I don't think they really know what happened other than the fact that he had a really bad infection. He starts to get better and they're like, give this man a kidney transplant. Like he's been on death's door. And so he gets a kidney transplant. By the time that happens, which is I think the summer between 8th and 9th grade for me, I was like a full-on man at that point. Because I'm like, I have to do well in school. Like, that's my mission in life. And if I do really well in school, that's going to be how I like carve my own path out. Because I didn't want to feel rudderless anymore. I wanted some degree of agency, some control over my life. And so I go from being not a very good student to being just locked in.
Wow.
And just at that point, like, figured out that I loved physics, I loved math. I'd kind of been given this gift of being introduced to this as a kid by my dad, right? And this, one of the interesting things growing up, right, is like doing well in school or studying math and stuff like this. This was not cool when we were kids, right? Like, you're kind of a loser if you did stuff like this, which I think is not a good thing. Like, I don't think that's a weird and bad thing for society to reinforce. Like, we want our young people to cherish education, because otherwise they're not going to know what the fuck they're talking about, right? Like, that's what that era of life is about learning stuff so that you have a better lens to look at like this weird thing called adulthood and life through. So
What was your dad studying at NASA? What was he working on?
he was doing atmospheric sciences.
What is that?
I think he was doing like satellite imaging.
No kidding.
Is that fucking wild?
Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up. It goes around full circle.
I mean, do you guys talk a lot about what you're doing now?
We do, yeah. He's my dad's a little bit older now, and he really wants to be involved. But honestly, at this stage, it's nice just to have something cool to talk to my dad about with. Yeah, so they come over and hang out with the kids pretty often.
They live next to you or close to you? Or?
They live pretty close by, yeah.
That's cool, man. That's cool. I wish my parents lived closer.
Where do your parents live?
They're in Florida.
That's right.
Yeah, they're in Florida. I moved to Florida, and then the whole family moved to Florida, and then
Really?
I left Florida. So, yeah, like I told you downstairs, I wanted to raise my kids in a different environment than South Florida. It's just a little too wild down there.
Yeah, at which point I made the argument that the best place to raise kids is Silicon Valley, which I don't actually think that's true.
With my busy schedule, I really need to take care of my wellness by getting a good night's sleep. For years now, I've had my Helix mattress that they've sent me to try, and it's really helped me sleep through the night and feel energized the next morning. I sleep without interruption and without any back pain, and I truly wake up feeling refreshed, and I'm always ready for whatever the day brings. Helix is made to fit your body type and sleep position, and Helix has been recommended by multiple leading professionals as a go-to solution for getting help improving sleep, especially if you have snoring issues, have sleep apnea, have trouble sleeping through the night, or if you're sleeping too hot. They can even recommend which mattress will work best for you. Now's the best time to try Helix, and they're giving my listeners an exclusive offer. Go to helixsleep.com/SRS for 27% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com for 27% off site-wide. helixsleep.com/SRS. Summer's here, and if you're anything like me, you didn't spend the winter just sitting around. You stayed sharp and kept moving. And now it's time your gear caught up. And that's why I want to introduce you to Roka. I've been looking for eyewear that can handle any situation with performance and style. And let me tell you, these aren't your average shades. I've tested them in the real world from shooting to fishing to off-roading, and they hold up. They're lightweight, don't slide around on my face, and can take a hit without falling apart. And the best part, they look good. They're clean and modern, no frills here, just premium eyewear that performs without compromise. That's something that I respect, and that's also why every time I head out the door, I reach for my Roka shades. Roka's based in Austin, Texas, American designed, no cut corners. The optics are crystal clear, cut through glare, and the fit stays comfortable all day long. Need a prescription? They've got you covered with both sunglasses and eyeglasses. Not only does Roka have awesome shades, they also have these that protect you against blue light. I wear these every night when I'm winding down for the day, and I still got to look at my phone or my laptop or my iPad. It just helps you wind down and get ready for bed. They are a one-stop shop for eyewear that's built to handle whatever life throws at you. Roka is the real deal. Ready to upgrade your eyewear? Check them out for yourself at roka.com and use code SRS for 20% off site-wide at checkout. That's ROKA.com. So where do we go from school?
Yeah, so second half of college or second half of high school was very fun. Felt like my brain woke up and I could just learn stuff. And I loved physics and I loved math. So I went whole hog. Like that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna try to get into Stanford or MIT or Caltech or Harvard or one of these like really good schools. And so I just like buried my nose in the textbook and I started actually working for, I want to say like a year or two and the nights and weekends and during the summers at this place called Jefferson Lab, which is a particle accelerator in Southern Virginia. So I was deep into physics.
A particle accelerator. What is that?
That's where you take high energy particles and you collide them to study the quantum mechanical effects.
This is like CERN.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with CERN?
I am.
What are they
familiar with
doing
CERN.
there?
They're studying quantum field theory, right? So quantum field theory is a fascinating subject, by the way. Should we talk about this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So do you know about quantum mechanics?
No.
All right. So Einstein, with his big old brain, figured a lot of this stuff out and actually didn't believe in a lot of it when he was alive, which is weird. Famously said, God doesn't play dice or roll dice. And quantum mechanics is this theory of the universe, which is fundamentally probabilistic, right? It's about probabilities. Mm-hmm. So the general idea of quantum mechanics is that you have, let's see if I can do a decent job of explaining this, is that things in nature have this particle behavior sometimes. Sometimes they have this wave behavior. And quantum states are when, I think it's actually easier to talk about quantum mechanics a little bit more specifically, like in the context of electromagnetism.
Okay.
And light. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get to, is there's this idea of, and this actually relates to the name of the company, Aetherflux, by the way. There's this idea of whether light is a wave or it's a particle. And different people through history have had different opinions on whether it's one or the other. And there's this idea, well, if light is a wave, then waves have some medium through which they propagate, right? And we knew that light has a lot of wave-like characteristics. It's got wavelength, and in turn, it's got a frequency. And you can kind of think about light in that way. One of the things that Einstein figured out, and a lot of the people that worked on quantum mechanics at the turn of the last century, was that it also has this particle behavior. And if you want to understand like how these two incongruent descriptions can fit together, quantum mechanics is kind of the machinery behind it. But quantum field theory is taking the machinery of quantum mechanics and trying to like explain more physical phenomenon with it. So let's see if I can do a paraphrasing of this or a good explanation of this. So quantum field theory basically says that there's different kinds of, for each of the fundamental forces that exist in the universe, right? There's different particles that carry the sort of interaction between things that are happening, and then there's the particles that actually carry the quantities, right? So if you have, in the context of electromagnetic interaction, you have charged particles like electrons and protons, and then you have ways in which charged particles sort of communicate with each other, which is with light, right? So quantum field theory is kind of like the generalization of that framework to how quarks and neutrinos work, to how other kinds of fundamental particles that are predicted might exist or not exist. So one of them more recently is this thing called the Higgs boson. Have you ever heard of this before?
No.
See if I can explain this without going into too much of a rabbit hole. But it's this thing in quantum field theory. It's a particle that was predicted to exist a long time ago when quantum field theory was first invented, as the particle that would give things mass. And there was a field that if different particles interacted with it, would give particles the phenomenon of mass. And there was this fundamental, I'm kind of trying to give a short version of this. There was a prediction that there would be this particle called the Higgs boson, which was central to this thing, but it was really, really difficult to observe. One of the stories that I've heard, it's been called the God particle over time, because I think originally it was called the goddamn particle because it was so goddamn hard to observe. But at some point, I think they felt that was not that didn't speak to the sensibilities of scientific publications in, I don't know, like the 50s or something like that. So they just called it the God particle. But creating these experiments that create collisions, that create these esoteric states of matter, where you might be able to observe a Higgs boson. This is the kind of stuff that CERN does.
Okay.
So they're probing this theory called quantum field theory to see all the weird predictions and see if you can create those in the real world. This is a very broad explanation.
I mean, there's a lot of theories out there that they're trying to create mini black holes and all this other stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty catchy. I don't know if that's gonna happen.
Not buying it, huh?
I'm not buying that. I mean, I think if something like that were to happen, it would probably evaporate in a very short amount of time.
I mean, does this have to do? I watch this stuff. I don't understand half of it, so I'm going to butcher this because I watched this a couple of years ago. But I remember watching this thing on YouTube, and it was talking about Max Planck. And I think what they were talking about, there was a couple different things, but they were talking about how different particles will act differently if they're being observed. If there's consciousness around it.
Yeah.
And even when they set a camera up, if somebody's watching the camera, then the particles will still act differently than if they're not being physically observed. Do you know about this?
I do, yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, it's this thing called the uncertainty principle. And this is something that comes from quantum mechanics. And let's see if I can remember this correctly. But there's basically the amount of precision that you can theoretically have when observing a system, right? So if I remember this correctly, it's that there's a few different statements of this uncertainty principle. And to any of the listeners out there that are actual physicists, if I get something wrong here, I'm sorry. But there's this basic idea that if you think about the measurement uncertainty of a physical system, the time uncertainty and the energy uncertainty, and you multiply those two together, that uncertainty is you're not going to be able to be more certain about those two things than a fixed amount. So if you get more precise with the exact time something is happening, then the exact energy becomes more variable, and vice versa. And so I kind of think about it as this lower bound for how accurately you can actually see or observe anything in the physical world. Because if you get more precise on the time measurement, the energy becomes uncertain. If you get more precise on the energy measurement, the exact time becomes uncertain. And there's other formulations of this uncertainty principle, but it basically is like a lower bound on how precise the description of the universe can be.
I think I read somewhere, maybe somebody said it on the show recently, I can't remember, but back to light. I either read or somebody said it on the show that we just froze light.
Yeah, I've heard about that too. I don't really know what that means.
I don't know what that means either.
Yeah, I don't really know what that means.
So is light a particle or a wave? Because I saw some other things. It was talking about when you shoot a beam into like a slit. The
It has both behaviors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Light is both a wave and a particle. This is the wild thing. It exists. It exhibits this thing called wave particle duality. And this is actually one of the things that Einstein figured out. So, a, related to this, but a little bit of a tangent, is the idea of like, what is the speed of light? Because this is one of the things that people were studying in the late 1800s to kind of try to understand what is the phenomenon of light. And the idea at the time, the prevailing theory is that light's a wave. And so if light is a wave, waves have mediums that they travel through, right? So if we're talking to each other, these are sound waves. They're traveling from little vibrations in my throat. They're vibrating the air and you're hearing them in your ear and vice versa, right? So the medium that the sound wave is traveling through is the air. Similarly, if you have the surface of water and you drop a stone in it, right? You're going to create a little wave that's going to travel on the surface of the water. So if light is a wave, what's the medium? Like what is the thing that light is oscillating that's behind this? So they famously called it the aether. So there's this medium that was postulated to exist called the aether that light would travel through that would give it this wave phenomenon. And there were a bunch of experiments done to sort of characterize the speed of light and in turn to characterize whatever this medium is that it's traveling through, which just led to a bunch of head scratching. So one of the famous scientific experiments during this time is called the Michelson-Morley experiment, where people tried to measure the speed of light. And again, this is kind of the paraphrasing of it, is if you have a light source and you pass it through basically and you split it in half and you have half of it go this direction, half of it go that direction. You have two mirrors that are the same distance and you bounce the light back, then presumably you would be able to see light traveling at a slightly faster speed in one direction or the other because the Earth is rotating, right? The Earth is moving, and in turn, the surface on which the light is being transported is moving. So if the Earth is rotating this way and you're firing the light that way, then you'd expect to see the speed of light to be a little faster in that direction versus in this direction, right? So they do this experiment, they find it to be the exact same. They're like, what the hell's going on here? So there's a bunch of sort of thinking that was done around the time to try to characterize whether there was something about our misunderstanding of the aether. Maybe it was like a really thick, viscous thing where it sort of smoothed out on the surface of the Earth, and that's the reason why light was behaving in this weird way through it. There are all these like ideas that people are coming up with. And then Einstein comes along and he's basically like, no, actually, it is the same in every direction because the speed of light is constant in every reference frame, whether it's moving or stationary. And the thing is, it's the speed of light that's the constant, and time and space like literally contract and expand to be able to keep that a constant. So this was kind of the beginning of...
What does that mean? Time and space can contract and expand.
Yeah, this is the theory of special relativity. This is like what put Einstein on the map. And if you go through and you actually just work out the equations for what happens, let's see if I can explain this in a simple real world example. So here's a real world example that you'll see. So if you have a clock on a satellite, because of this relativistic effect, because the satellite is moving really quickly, in the reference frame of the satellite, you'll actually see the clock ticking at a slightly different pace than you'll see it on the surface of the Earth. So you actually have to do some computation in the limit to be able to figure out that difference. See if I can do a better job of explaining how this actually works. It's a pretty esoteric one. But now let me see if I can think of a good example of how to explain length, time dilation, and length contraction. Or yeah. Maybe we come back to this one. I'm not sure if I've got a great simple explanation.
Let me ask you about quantum entanglement. It sounds like it's going to revolutionize communications, especially crypto. And so it's my understanding that you take a particle, you split it in half, put one over here, you could put the other one in another room, in another country, infinite distance away. And if you put a vibration on this half, then the other half will mimic that exact same vibration no matter what the distance is. Am I correct?
Yep.
Can anybody explain why that is happening?
This actually has to do with what we were talking about a couple of minutes ago around uncertainty, right? So what ends up happening is you have two particles that together are in a certain quantum state. And if, for example, if this one is up, and so it might be the case that if you have these two things, that together on average, like half of the time this one's up, half the time this one's down. And so on average, it's flat. Just make a simple analogy here, right? But you don't know at any point in time whether this one's up. So there's two particles in your system, and on average, one of them is up and one of them is down. It could be like this, it could be like this, or it could be like this as it's changing states between the two. But that together, these two things are entangled. And that always, on average, one is going to be up and one is going to be down. Now, this kind of comes back to that uncertainty thing that we were talking about, right? So if you can keep these things truly entangled with one of them and physically separate them, and you take this one and you look at it and you're like, oh, it's up, that's going to force the other one into the down state. Because these things are entangled, and on average, the quantum state together shares, like, it's flat, meaning if one of them is up, the other one's down. Mm-hmm. Then just by looking at one of them, you force the other one into the opposite state. So this is how you would be able to encode something at a long distance like this.
Man,
does that make sense?
It does make sense. I can't, I mean, maybe nobody can, I don't know, but how are they communicating? How are they still entangled?
Yeah.
Is it everything is connected?
This is one of the true mysteries of the universe.
Does it mean there's multiverse?
I don't know about that, man. I don't know if there's enough evidence to suggest that there's a multiverse. I think it's a theoretical possibility, but there's a lot of theoretical possibilities out there.
Do you think about this stuff a lot?
I do actually. Yeah, I have a lot in the past. I'm not sure I think about it that much today. That's why I'm kind of like, let me see if I can explain this and try to like reach back about a decade in my physics knowledge and see if I can come up with an example that kind of makes sense. No, I do think about it a decent bit. I think there's this is the thing about quantum mechanics, and one of the things that I love about quantum mechanics is that it's very, very unintuitive. Right? When you think about physics and having been trained as a physicist, it's all about intuition for how the physical world works, right? And it's kind of like you study the equations enough, and then you form a sort of, literally an intuitive understanding of how it might work in different contexts. Because a lot of physics is like, you're trying to imagine how something could happen. You've got a problem on a piece of paper, and you're trying to paint a picture of it in your head. Quantum mechanics makes that really hard because it's fundamentally very, very unintuitive. So when you think about like what's a physical analog to how this might work in the real world, a lot of time with quantum mechanics, you're like kind of drawing a blank because you're like, things don't really work like that in the normal world. But you know that if you zoom in close enough, they have all these weird phenomenons to them. think a related question is like, is there a higher power?
What
Is
do you
there a
think?
higher being? I don't know. I fundamentally don't know. I'm curious. I've gone back and forth on it. The place I've landed is that I'm not sure that it's a question that we as humans can really answer.
That's it. Are your parents do? What do your parents believe?
My mom is religious. My dad is not. My dad is a very spiritual person, but he's not a religious person. And he told me that from a pretty early age. He's like, I'm not going to tell you to believe in God or not to believe in God. It's kind of up to you. So my dad kind of raised me in that way. It's like, the big questions, you can ask me what I think, but I'm not going to tell you what to think. It's kind of on you to figure out.
It's good.
You?
Do I believe there's a higher power?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tell me about it.
100%. Well, I grew up Catholic, and but I didn't really take it serious. I never took it seriously, and but I was raised in that. Went to church every Sunday. Then I joined the SEAL teams, and just lost it. Like, didn't believe in anything. Couldn't explain why people were dying, and why out of a platoon of us. I mean, SEAL teams are a fucked up place for a young adult. I mean, there's a lot of it's just it's not a great environment. A lot of drinking, a lot of infidelity, a lot of fighting, and then there's the whole war thing. And I would see if you had somebody that didn't cheat on their wife and that was sober, it was almost like some type of a phenomenon within the SEAL teams. And time again, I would see, there would be a bunch of us, and I loved all the guys that I was with, but like I said, 99% of us were. I wasn't married at the time, but it's cheating on your wife. It's getting in bar fights. It's just it's a different life. And I would see the guys that get killed in action, and a lot of times it would be the guy that's not out with the platoon, drinking, bar fighting, womanizing. It would be the guy that's a really good dad, that is a really good husband, that somehow has figured out the balance between war and family life. And it was just time and time again, those were the guys that were getting killed, and it made me feel guilty, and it actually like took a lot of faith from me in God. And it was like, this makes no sense. Why would you fucking take the guy
That guy, yeah.
that has kids, that is there for his kids, who is a good dad and is a good role model and a good husband, and not just for his kids, but for society as a whole. And then you got a guy like me who consider myself a piece of shit, who's womanizing, you know what I mean? And it's like, it made me feel guilty. It didn't make any damn sense, kind of like quantum mechanics. And so, and then, and that was very early on in my career. And then I kept moving, and I never really thought about it. And then, recently, it was after my psychedelics. I did psychedelics, and I did this thing called 5-MeO-DMT2 after I did the ibogaine, which is it's a death experience. You legitimately, like, there's no question in your mind, you're dying. You're going to die. And so I think what it does is it's a
does that
pineal
do to
gland
you?
dump.
Like, what does that do to your perspective?
It changes everything, because when you do it, so basically, and I'll speed this up a little bit, but you smoke this, and then you feel like you're dying, and it gets stronger and stronger. It kind of feels like an eternity, but it really only lasts maybe 15, 30 seconds, and maybe even less than that. But you start sorting through everything in your life, and it like light speed, and you start to separate from the materialistic world, and I mean everything, and you don't have time to process what's going on, but you start to separate from. You might be thinking about a friend, and you you make that separation. And for me, it was getting rid of materialistic stuff, friends, family, da da da. Da. And then you go and it's all the things that you're holding on to that you
Yeah.
value in the world that we live in, right?
Yeah.
And then the last things for me was when I did this, I only had my son and my wife, and those were the last things that I was grasping onto, and it was like a fight. It was like I cannot die because if I die, I'm leaving my less than 1 year old son at the time behind in this fucked up world, and my wife, who is a stay at home mom, and then you separate from that. And when you separate from the last thing, you cross over into like this other realm. And a lot of
So you
people,
actually thought you were gonna die when you did this?
yeah, there's zero question in your brain that you are departing life. It's over. And you don't know where you're going, and it's happening, and you cannot stop it. And so after you go through that, like I said, it feels like an eternity, but it's only a matter of seconds. And then when you make that final separation, then you cross over into this other realm, and it's also called the God molecule, and it's called the bliss drug or something like that. And you cross over, and you sounds kind of hippie-ish, but when I was growing up, the hippies, and they're all talking about everything's energy and all this other shit, and I'm like, okay, whatever. Well, you feel that when you cross over, and I did not. I wanted to do it. I just wanted to see Earth and nature when I did it, so I didn't put the blindfold on. And so when I made that separation, I crossed over. I opened my eyes and like sat up, and this is off just south of. It was in. I think it's actually in Rosarita, Mexico. So you're on the beach, and I opened my eyes, and I could just. I did not see anything that wasn't there. It wasn't like Grateful Dead, psychedelics, pink elephants and rainbows and all this shit. Everything that I saw was actually there, but it was like this intuition was injected into me, and I could feel the flow of energy, and so I could see it like coming from the ocean into the beach, into the grass, up the trees, the birds. I mean, everything just was in perfect harmony. And that lasts for about 15 minutes, and a lot of people say they can feel friends or relatives that have passed, and they're in this other realm, or some people see them. I felt the presence of my best friend, who we were talking about, Gabe, up there.
That was your best friend.
Yeah, I could feel his presence, and it made me realize that everything that has happened and that will happen in the world and in my life is exactly the way it's supposed to be, no matter how it happened or how I experienced it. And so when I came out of that, it made me realize that there's definitely something more to this than any of us have put together.
Yeah.
And so then I started looking into, that's actually when I started watching all these quantum mechanics videos and stuff like that, because I wanted to understand what that was, and I was really into energy. I was like, what is it?
What is it?
Why are we here? What's driving all this? And so it sent me down this path, and I started watching all these things, and that's when I was looking at the Big Bang and the multiverse and all these other things. Fast forward a couple of years, and we're in Sedona, and I had this. I wasn't happy with the way the world was going, and this is probably about 2 years ago. So a lot of things that were going on in the country just really tugged on my heart, and I was enraged about a lot of things, like probably a lot of the stuff that you see in Silicon Valley, it just really bothered me. Like the gender stuff with children is just something that always I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand reading about it, hearing about it.
I share that feeling with you.
And
Especially as a father of young children, you're like, this is not it's not appropriate for
yeah,
kids.
yeah. And that stuff was really bothering me. And then I dive deep into China. I talk about it all the time. And a lot of the stuff that was going on over there and how they're pulling ahead and the spy balloon and all the, it was around this time frame. And I went to Sedona because I had read there's all these energy fields in Sedona. And I was like, maybe I'll feel something. I don't know. We'll see. We'll go on some hikes, go to some of these energy vortexes. I want to see if I feel anything. I didn't feel anything. And the last day there, it was a really rough trip of mine too. A really good friend of mine had just died. I'd done some heavy interviews with a really good friend, Brian Montgomery, who's dove into he's fighting sex trafficking and kids and sex exploitation and had another interview with this kid, Tyler Andrew Vargas. Not a kid, he's a man. And sorry, Tyler, but he was the only one that survived the Abbey Gate bombing during the Afghan withdrawal. Had him come in here. Nobody would give him a platform to talk about his story. Comes in here, one leg, one arm, hobbles up these stairs to do this interview. No media would touch it. It was disgusting how the last administration handled the withdrawal, not only the withdrawal, but him personally. Tried to testify in front of Congress. Rough story, right? And so I got all this weight, and I'm supposed to be on vacation with my wife. And like, I broke down on the plane. Like, and I'm not a guy that breaks down, but broke down
Cannot imagine that.
in tears. And she's like, what? Like, what the hell is wrong with you? And and I was just angry the whole trip. Very last day, I'd stayed off social media the whole trip. It's the last day. I'm like, well, let's see what's going on. And, I have to be on there for my business. I look, I see something that really pisses me off. And I'm like, we got to go on a hike. So we go on a hike, go up to this energy vortex, don't feel shit. And on the way back down, I had this like internal battle going on in my head. That's like I felt like nobody else cared, and I felt like I was the only one talking about this stuff. And I was trying to basically convince myself, like, Shawn, why do you let this shit affect you so much? Like, this isn't like, just give in. Maybe you're the fucked up one. Maybe kids should be able to change their gender at 6 years old, and quit letting this stuff bother you. Like, it's painfully obvious that the majority, and this is all in my head, right? But the majority of the population is for this, and it seems like America wants this to happen. Everywhere I look, they're talking about this, and they're complaining about the party that doesn't want it to happen, and so anyways, it's just something that really weighed on me, and I felt like I was like surrendering my soul to the devil or something. And we walk through, we walk back into the gate, and we were in this. They had an armed guard at the gate, and I pay attention to security just because of my background, and a lot of the security guards there knew who I was because of the podcast, and they would always come up and say hi and want to chat, and I'd been there for a whole week, and I walked by, and there's this old guy who I'd never seen there before, ever. And he stops me, and he wants to talk, and I just told you the state of mind I'm in. I'm not in the mood. I'm like looking at him over my shoulder, telling him, hey, I don't want to talk right now. I'm not in the mood. I just want to go to my fucking bungalow and call it a night. And so he snags my wife, and she's with me, and he starts talking to her, and I'm like,
Great.
turn around, and I look at him, and I square up, and he looks at me right in the eyes, and he fucking read my mind from front to back. And like every thought that I was having on that hike, never met this guy, never seen him. Like I said, I'd been there for a week. I thought I had met everybody. And he's like, hey, all this gender stuff that you're worried about, That's not your fight. And you don't need to worry about that. And all this stuff that you're worried about with China, that's not your fight either. And I'm like, after he said that,
You're just like
it freaked me out because I'm like,
so this guy just said
this
this
guy's
to you.
in my head. He's in my fucking
Did you
head.
prompt
And he
him to
went
this?
on. No, I didn't say a word. I just turned and looked at him like, all right, I guess we're going to have a conversation, like kind of being a dick. And that's what he opened up his conversation with, was reading my fucking mind.
Who was this person?
Exactly. Who was this person? So I go, so my mind blanks out after he said the China thing. It's
Yeah.
like he's talking about gender stuff, talking about China, and I'm like freaked out. Never seen this man before in my life. And he's in my head reading my mind. And so that ends. And then I look at my wife. We're walking back to, which is like a 2-minute walk back to our bungalow. And I'm like, I think God just fucking talked to me. And my wife goes, yeah, Shawn. She's like, God's always talking to you. You just don't make room for him. You don't realize it. And we go into my bungalow, and we were just talking about Gabe, and I could go on for an hour about this, but Gabe has always been around. Like, I just feel his presence a lot, and I know he's around because little rabbit hole. Right before Gabe died, he had started this. He wanted to start this Wounded Warriors Hockey League, and he told me he was going to have the Florida Panthers sponsor it. Mm-hmm. And I also told you Gabe was a heroin addict at the time, and I'm like,
How are you going to do
better
that?
clean it up if you're going to
Yeah.
pull that one off, buddy.
Yeah.
Because you look like shit. Well, I'll be damned. He gets it done. And the fucking Panthers sponsored his Wounded Warrior team. In fact, when they went to deliver him the good news and to knock on the door to tell him they were going to sponsor his team, the NHL was going to sponsor the first ever Wounded Warriors hockey team. When they knocked on the door to tell him, that's when they found him dead from a heroin overdose. Let's fast forward. Panthers win the
What year was
Stanley
this?
Cup for the first time ever. What's that?
What year was this?
This was it was about 2 years ago, so probably 23.
Okay.
So I got
Sorry, for some reason I thought your friend passed away years prior. Sorry, I'm just
Yeah.
putting two and two together in my head.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, he passed away before this. This is a while. When the Panthers won in this event that I'm about to tell you happened, it's about 2 years ago. So the team gave me one of the original jerseys, and it has Gabe's name on it, SEAL Team 10 logo, and Panthers win the Stanley Cup, and that jersey's hanging down there in the front doorway. And I come in, and the day the Panthers won the Stanley Cup, that frame has been sitting there for 3 years, hasn't moved. Falls off the wall, probably weighs about 35, 40 pounds. Not a scratch on it, no broken glass, nothing. I mean, so anyways, I'm telling you, Gabe's always around.
Excited.
And there's a bunch of other things that I could talk to you about on how he's been around. In fact, when we went to there, I told you I was in this vulnerable state, and we saw this guy that looked exactly like my friend Gabe. Like, same build, same brow line, same jaw line. Like, if you put them side by side, they would be identical twins. But I could tell, obviously that it wasn't Gabe, but I was like, it's legitimately like an identical twin with some minute differences. And throughout the trip, this guy's everywhere with me. If we go to the pool, this guy happens to be at the pool. If we're going out on a hike, he's coming down the same trail going the opposite direction.
Talk to this guy?
No. If we go out in town and leave the resort for dinner, the guy winds up being at the same restaurant. And my wife, Katie's like, there he is, there he is, there he is, there he is. So sure as shit, we walk back from the gate. Like I said, this is like a 2-minute walk. And it's like a duplex, like a bungalow that's a duplex. Didn't know who was staying on the other side this entire time. Walk up there, and there's this fucking guy that looks identical to Gabe, and he's the guy staying in the other half of the bungalow with his family. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, okay, that's weird. Now, I told you that I just lost a really good friend of mine here in Franklin. He was a SEAL, and he owned a bunch of smaller hospitals. And he's like one of the only friends that I had at the time where I knew he wasn't going to ask me for favors or promote his product or whatever, the podcast. He didn't need the exposure that I could bring him, and we could just sit down. I didn't want anything from him. He doesn't want anything from me. We both know that, and our relationship starts developing really fast. He died of a heart attack on a hunting trip right before I left on this trip, probably in his 50s. And died with his son was on that trip. Actually, like a really good way to go. Died happy. His son was with him. Like, it was good. And he had just died days before. Go into the room, and I'm telling my wife, I can't believe this has happened to me. Like, what the hell is going on? I can't believe this. And she's like, quit saying you can't believe it. Like, it's
happening.
It's falling in your lap right
Yeah.
now. Like, he's slapping you in the face. And my phone dings. Don't answer it because I'm in the middle of this discussion with my wife. And so we get done with that discussion, and I'm kind of cleaning myself up. It's pretty emotional. And I pick up my phone, and it's his daughter, who I'd not met. Doesn't have my number. Wasn't close with his family. I'd met his son a couple of times. I'd met his wife. I'd not met his daughter. And his daughter sends me this text, and she says, I'll summarize it. It says, hey, I just walked into my dad's gun room for the first time since he had passed. And basically says that her dad talked to her and said, I want you to talk to Shawn because Shawn knows a side of me that nobody else knows. And Shawn was becoming my best friend really fast, and he just wanted her to tell me that he loves me for who I am. Now, this shit all happens within 5-10 minutes.
Yeah,
And so that to me was that was it. I was like, okay, you've got my attention.
yeah.
And so anyway, so then I came home and made a bunch of calls to people that I know that are in this. My first call was this guy Eddie Penny, who had talked about his journey to Christ. Eddie Penny was a SEAL Team 6 guy and had another really rough go, and then found Christ. And I released his episode on Christmas of 2022, maybe. And ever since then, just about every single person on the show has brought up God in some way, shape, or form. And I didn't put that together really until this. And I went back through and I was like, every single one of them. And so I called Eddie. Anyways, and that's what led me to believing in God, is that experience. So it was through psychedelics turned the light on and had me exploring, and then that like solidified it right there. I was like, wow, like that's too many coincidences going on all at one time for there not to be some type of a higher power.
I've never had an experience like that. I kind of hope I do at some point in my life.
I hope you do too. It was life changing.
That's incredible, man. I'm kind of speechless. I think this question of what is the higher calling, what's out there, where did we come from? These are all kind of intrinsically related, right? And it's kind of the question of like, we know what the what and the where and the how is, but like, what's the why, right?
Yeah.
And the version of it that I've wrestled with through the course of my life is I've never had a personal experience that's like led me to believe it one way or the other. And I tell you honestly, I haven't had too many people that I've been close to pass away. I consider myself really fortunate in that. I know it's coming, right? Like time will take us all eventually. But the version of it that I've always wrestled with is kind of what I know about physics and math and science, and kind of saying, okay, well, if you believe that these are the laws of nature, right? That these are the things that govern how the universe works. You study physics, that's fundamentally what you're doing, right? Is you're looking for a theory of how the world works. And if you look at that theory and it's looking to your eyes like it's very accurate and it really is describing the whole world around you, you're like, that's how the world works, right? And it's like, well, how could there be a human-like thing, human-like being that has the emergent phenomenon of humanity? That is the higher calling. That's the higher being, right? How could you reconcile those two? Where you know through studying and empirical evidence that light has this wave particle duality, right? And that quantum field theory, for example, is, I think it's the most experimentally verified scientific theory. Because every time you scatter some particles off of each other, you measure the angle in which they kind of come out of it. And if you can measure those really accurately and you get a lot of scattering events, like you'll get more and more data that says this theory that's predicting this is matching nearly identically to what's happening in the real world. So you're like, are those the laws of nature? And they're incomplete, right? Because we were just talking about like what happens when you get to a small enough time scale. Well, your understanding of the universe starts to get really wobbly, right? Or if you get to a really precise energy scale, like when it happens starts to become really wobbly. So it's not a perfect theory of all this, but it is a theory that explains this stuff. So how could there be a God, right? And then, at least for me, time goes on, and then you ask the question, how could you have such well-written theories without somebody writing them down?
Yeah. I mean, I think,
Right? How could you not have God?
yeah.
So the question is, which one of these is right? And I think the place that I've landed is that my little monkey brain can't really answer this question. And I'd rather spend my time thinking about things that I can't understand.
Makes sense. I mean, I see like,
How could the pieces fit together so nicely if they weren't?
but then there's all these, then there's the no answers, the where we can't find the answer, like a fundamental part of life. It's like, where does consciousness reside? Nobody seems to be able to figure that out. What makes you, you? It's your consciousness, right?
Yeah,
Where does it live? Where does it go?
it's an emergent phenomenon.
Where the fuck does it go?
Does it
Is
go
that your
anywhere?
soul?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe we just have not. Maybe we haven't hit that point where, or maybe we never will hit that point, and we never will figure that out. I don't know, but it's a mystery.
I tell you, this is not directly related to it, but it kind of is in the same way. I'm very curious about whether there's life on other planets.
What do
Or
you think?
there's life elsewhere in the universe. I think there is.
You do.
I do, yes.
What makes you think that?
I want to believe that.
You want to-
I want to believe that because I think the alternative is like it's very grim. It's very dark. The alternative is that there's nothing out there, and that this thing that we call consciousness or life is incredibly fleeting and fragile.
Well, I think
Like I don't want to believe that. But it kind of, at least to me, leads me to ask the question, like, what has somebody else figured this out? Right? Might the answer be I think this is like people care about aliens, right? It's like, might there be some other species out there that knows the answer? Might they be trying to tell us the answer?
Hmm.
If we could just talk to them, would we get the answer? Right? Is there an understanding of how the universe works that is so crystal clear after in 10 million years, for example, right? From where we are today, where somebody could just explain that. Aside, I think we need a lot more observation of the night sky. Because if there is life out there, I don't know that we're really looking for it.
I don't know, man. I've gone onto this topic quite a few times, and it's obviously very conspiratorial, and there's never any hard evidence, and I don't think there is.
Oh, of there being life out there?
I don't think there is.
There's some pretty good evidence of it.
Like, I have not heard it. Well, I'd love to hear it.
Okay, so this one is a more recent historical one, recent in the scope of human history. And again, to the scientists out there, if I'm missing some of the points and butchering them, I'm sorry. Because I'm sure there's some real scientific people that are watching this. There was that star system. I want to say this was James Webb. Again, I'm kind of guessing a little bit on this, but there was the observation of a star system, and in particular, looking at the behavior of stars as planets pass around them far, far away in the night sky, right? So neighboring star systems. I think in this case, the star system was like 1.5 or 2 light years away. So the amount of distance it takes light to travel in is a tremendous distance, right? But if you look at a star from far, if you look at a star system, right, that's got planets going around it, and for example, let's take the example of the Earth and Jupiter, right? Or sorry, the Sun and Jupiter. Jupiter's big; it's a big planet, right? So as Jupiter is orbiting the Sun, the mass of Jupiter is also pulling the Sun, right? So the actual orbit's more like this. It's kind of an exaggerated version of it. Where if you look at a bright spot in the night sky with a telescope, or with a really fancy one like the James Webb Space Telescope, right? If it's got a planet or planetary systems around it, it's going to be wobbling a little bit. Moreover, you can take these bright spots in the night sky and look at the spectrum of light that's coming from it, right? So if you just plot out, this is a simple example, your x-axis, you plot out an xy plot, right? Your x-axis is different frequencies of light. Your y-axis is how much light of that frequency, right? So you kind of see a curve like that. And you look at this bright spot in the night sky, and you see this sort of wobbling thing, and then you see as one of the planets passes in front of it, the brightness dims, right? Because literally there's something in the way. So the light coming from it kind of goes down as the planet's moving in front of it. Now, this is the thing that was reported in a bunch of scientific journals earlier this year, actually. Pretty sure it was earlier this year. Is there was this one star system and a planet orbiting it where they actually observed, this is the star, this is the planet, and in this case, my eyes are the Earth, right? The planet passing in front of the star system, and the light from the star, like passing through the atmosphere of the thing that's in front of it, right? And when the light passes through the atmosphere, right, it scatters off some of the particles, it excites some of the particles, and you can actually see the signature of the molecules in the atmosphere of the thing that passed in front of it by looking at that XY plot I was saying, right? So it goes dim, but you also see some peaks and valleys cropping up that give you a snapshot of what molecules are in the atmosphere of the planet that's passing in front of it. And they basically found the biomarkers for life.
I mean, they found water on. I think they found water on Saturn, right? And is it Neptune?
I don't know. I know they found water on see if I remember.
Mars. And they have
Found water
lives
on
on
Mars.
Mars.
Yeah, there's presumably like water, like lakes of water, or an underground ocean of water on some of the planets or some of the moons of Jupiter. So if you want to look for extraterrestrial life, I think there's one of two ways you do it. The first one is you just try to like knock on the door and it's like, is anyone there, right? I think that's the going to Mars and looking for like microbial life in the water, right? Or subterranean. I think that's going to Europa and drilling down and seeing if there's an ocean underneath there and if there's whales or something like that, right? The other approach is looking at bright spots in the night sky and seeing if you see any markers for life. And this example that I'm talking about more recently, I want to say it was methane, I could be wrong, that they found the signature form in the frequencies of light that were coming back as this planet passed in front of the star system. But the thought process there was that is the only way that we know that that's made on Earth is through life. So if there's a ton of this stuff in the atmosphere of this planet, like how is it getting there? The hypothesis is that this is kind of a smoking gun, that there's some sort of biology on this planet that's producing this gas. So if that's the case, number one, we should be observing the shit out of that planet and see, for example, if there's any electromagnetic radiation that might indicate some sort of intelligent life. But as we develop better telescopes and more of them and have them simultaneously pointed at more spots in the night sky, might this be the case in a lot of different places, right? Might this actually be the case that if we look simultaneously like everywhere in the night sky, that there's some star system that's broadcasting some electromagnetic signal that's got information in it?
Well, I did hear something that we were receiving some type of a beacon or a signal from wherever, way the hell out there.
The
But they can't explain what it is.
The conspiracies I love is where you see like a star system or a set of star systems or something related to specific spots in the night sky that show up in conspiracy theories, because it just makes you wonder. It's like, is that actually a conspiracy?
Yeah.
Or might if you just observe the crap out of it, might there be a little bit more to it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel like, like I do believe in God. I think a lot of the things people are seeing are some type of spiritual thing. And then, but then, they're starting to find, I mean, I don't know, did they ever debunk the pyramid on Mars or anything? Sometimes I
think that one
wonder
was.
if there's life, if there was life.
As this conversation gets more serious, I'm gonna need some gummies.
Sometimes I wonder, I mean, they talk about ancient civilizations and, maybe there were more advanced civilizations here on Earth than what we are now, 100 million years ago or whatever. And then the Earth does the things, gets rid of all the evidence, and then it's, here we go again. And sometimes I wonder, I mean, they talked about the pyramid, or supposedly they found a pyramid on Mars. I don't know if they ever debunked that or what, but I've talked to remote viewers. I do think that's real, remote viewing.
What was remote viewing?
Dude, you don't know about remote viewers?
Tell me.
Holy shit. So remote viewers, how do I put this? Remote viewers, okay, you've seen surely you've seen some type of a movie or a TV show where they bring on the psychic and the psychic's like, oh, it happened over there in the shower and they used a knife. And then they go in there and they're like, holy shit, here's the knife. That's remote viewing. So that's actually, people can do it. It's a real thing.
Really?
Yeah, the CIA had a program going with the Monroe Institute for a long time. I brought in Joe McMoneagle, who's remote viewer #1 for the United States, and remote viewed a Russian submarine that was going to be launched on a particular date. And the director of the CIA said he was full of shit. Another agency got in touch with him, and they were like, where is it, and when is this happening? And he was like, it's right here. in Russia. They're going to roll it off into this canal, and it's going to go into the ocean from there, and it's going to happen on this date. And I think he was only like a couple of dates off, and it happened. And so that triggered them to start this program called Stargate. It's called the Stargate program.
I'm going to look this up.
I'll send you the interview.
Please do. I'm
fascinating.
fascinated by this.
So I went down that rabbit hole and brought on a bunch of these guys. Some of the guys that started Stargate, and some of the guys that finished, the program managers that finished
Does
Stargate.
it still exist?
Stargate doesn't exist, but I'm sure it's, renamed under another program or so. I know Naval Special Warfare was looking into this stuff recently. I got some
Is there
documents.
any scientific explanation for how this works? Just
Nope.
just an emergent phenomenon.
Well, the way Joe describes it, Joe says, early human beings, had this, and we used more of our brain back then. And he goes, at the beginning, we would look at each other and we would know what each other's thinking and, point to things and whatever, but you would, I guess, kind of like how animals communicate.
Yeah.
We're
Sense and subtle stuff. And
we think we're so much more advanced, but look how long it takes us to converse and to get our thoughts out now that we have language, and so basically what he was saying is we were a lot more intuitive way back in the beginning, and that we could kind of read each other's thoughts, and so communication was almost instantaneous. And he goes, and then we started traveling around in tribes, and we started, developing language, and then technology came along, and we got our head buried in a fucking phone or watching TV and talking, and, and he goes, and so he goes, well, we feel like that's more advanced. What we actually did is we're going this way because we had the intuitive brain power to be able to communicate without language, without any type of electronic communication. It was just instantaneous. And he goes, he thinks that, I mean, and this is theory obviously, but he thinks that we've lost that over time, and that everybody still has the ability to do it, but
most people know.
you'll never figure it out, because we're too busy wrapped up in other things. And kind of like what my wife was telling me when I just told you, she's like, hey, God's always around you. You just don't make the time to let him in, and you're not paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And when you just see the world presented to you on a screen in such a digestible format, like we're little monkey brains, we'll just spend all day on that.
yeah.
Like we will basically follow down the path of the thing that's the most understandable. That's kind of how humans work, right? Given choice between something that maybe is really hard to understand but very important, and something that's very easy to understand but very unimportant, humans are going to follow they're going to follow the path down this direction.
Yep.
On average.
But what I was getting at is maybe there was life on other planets before there was life. Maybe there's only life in the universe. Maybe there's only life at one place at one specific moment in time, and then when that's over, it pops up
somewhere else.
I don't know. You know what I mean? But
Are you familiar with this thing called Fermi's paradox? Is it
No.
Fermi's paradox? Yeah, it's like the where is everybody?
do you ever just get stuck on the home screen trying to pick a show to watch? Or when you're trying to decide what to have for dinner, you just pour a bowl of cereal instead? Having too many options can be overwhelming. The same applies if you're a business owner who's hiring. It can be overwhelming to have too many candidates to sort through. But you're in luck. ZipRecruiter now gives you the power to proactively find and connect with the best ones quickly. How? Through their innovative resume database. And right now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/SRS. ZipRecruiter's resume database uses advanced filtering to quickly hone in on top candidates for your roles. Skip the candidate overload. Instead, streamline your hiring with ZipRecruiter. See why 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Just go to this exclusive web address, ziprecruiter.com/SRS right now to try it for free. Again, that's ziprecruiter.com/SRS. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You know, work can be a stressful place. All those emails piling up, back-to-back meetings, and that constant pressure to keep up. Summer might be the perfect time to pause and take small steps toward improving your own wellness. With over 30,000 therapists and more than 5 million people served globally, it's incredibly easy to fit into your schedule. You can meet with a licensed therapist right from your phone and even switch therapists at any time. With an App Store rating of 4.9 out of 5 from over 1.7 million reviews, it's clear it's helping a lot of people. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/SRS. That's BETTERHELP.com/SRS. All right, we're back from the break. Man, we went down some rabbit holes there.
Did.
I love rabbit holes.
Me too.
Remote viewing. You got to look into it.
I'm absolutely going to look into it.
It is fascinating. But I want to get into Robinhood. How did that come about?
How indeed. Company was the brainchild of two good friends from college. We talked about it a little bit. I don't know if we were chatting. I can't remember if it was on the air. Right? I guess it was. Yeah, we were talking about Occupy Wall Street a little bit, right?
No, that was not on there.
Oh, that was just that was before. Okay, yeah. So, do you remember Occupy?
I do. I don't remember like the whole premise of it. I don't know much about stocks or any of that kind of stuff. So you have to walk me through it a little bit. But I remember the movement. It was basically, from what I understand, it was the everyday Americans were getting pissed off that they couldn't invest in the stock market, correct?
That was a version of it that we saw. There were just general, I feel like the frustration was after 2008, right? Like we bailed out the banks and everybody else felt like they got screwed.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember the exact number on this, but like a lot of the recovery did go back to the wealthiest in this country. And so we're talking like 2011. So this is 2 years after the financial crisis. And people were really, really upset about that. And so there were protests in New York, right? They were literally occupying Wall Street. And we weren't a part of the protests, but we were working in finance in New York at the time, right? And we had a lot of friends in college. And they were like, "What are you doing, man?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What am I doing?" At the time, we were building a different finance company that was building technology for other financial institutions, like sort of computerized trading, low latency trading, sort of like the direction that markets were becoming more and more electronic. And we're building technology to make markets more efficient. And a lot of our friends were like, "No, you're part of the problem." And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what does that even mean? Right? They're like, "You guys are like not, you're part of the system, man." Like that sort of sentiment. So that was kind of the backdrop. And then we would see these protests happening in New York. And I remember just being like, the sentiment here is very real, right? But it's kind of like the idea of, and this was kind of, we talked a little bit about the immigrant background, right? But as people whose families made huge sacrifices to be in America, to look at the financial system and be like, this thing is messed up or rigged or doesn't work or whatever, right? It doesn't ring true. It's like that. This is the envy of everybody in the world, this financial system, right? Like we should have more people be a part of it. So this was kind of like the backdrop for what would become Robinhood. This was kind of the cultural backdrop, right? And I remember the genesis of the company started over a phone conversation that my co-founder and I had. And it was kind of like the company that we were building then was not doing super well. And we're like, what else what else can we do? And we're like, like people are really upset about access to the markets. They're really upset about wealth inequality and all these things. And I remember the thought was, it's like, actually, access to the stock market is kind of a microcosm of this bigger thing that people are frustrated about. And we weren't going to be able to change politics. We weren't going to be able to change policy. And I think at the time, the sense was people want the government to do something about this. And this is probably the beginning of my like view towards individuality really emerging and kind of having the sense of like, this is not, the government's not going to solve this problem. In no way, like that's not going to happen, right? Yep. Like you're going to get some people that like make noise about it that get elected and nothing's actually going to change here. But maybe this is something we can change with technology. This is kind of like the bright-eyed and bushy-tailed optimism you get from young people, right? When you don't know what you don't know, and we're like, we could change it, we could fix this problem. And if we could make access to market zero commission, which is kind of what the original idea behind the company was, wouldn't that actually be kind of directly speaking to the frustrations that people have about not being a part of the financial system? And this is where the bigger leap of faith came, right? It's like, and if more people of our generation were a part of the financial system, then they wouldn't be so frustrated, and we'd basically live in a more harmonious or like happier society. Because I didn't want to grow up with people being up in arms about this. Mm-hmm. Like it just seemed like a really nasty discourse. Enter Robinhood. Mobile, zero commission, and kind of like built from the ground up, brand new. At least the interface and the way the product looked was, I think, pretty different than what was out there at the time.
I mean, yeah, it was different. Everybody was
totally different. Yeah. When did you hear about it?
I don't remember exactly when I heard about it, but I remember when I did hear about it. It didn't matter how much money you had, you got access to the market, and I was like, oh, this is cool. So I started using it. I mean, I can't remember. It was probably around, I would bet 2010 time frame, maybe.
A little later than that. We released it publicly, I want to say in 2015.
Well, then it was then it was after then.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had heard about it and I was like, oh, this is fucking cool.
You know what I was spending a lot of my time doing? Interviewing customers, talking to customers. Because I basically realized at a pretty early point in that company's history that if we try to build this product like Google builds Gmail, for example, right, that it wasn't going to go super well. And that the way that people used our product was going to be fundamentally a little different. What am I talking about here? If you have a person, like a very wealthy person, and you've got an ordinary person using an email client, right? The way that you use an email client is not going to be fundamentally different, right? You're like the rich person still like typing in a message and sending it to somebody. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, if you have a bunch of really well-paid engineers that are building Gmail, for example, and they're like, this is how I use it, and that's how I think other people are going to use it, the fact that those people make a lot of money is not going to it's not going to change their perspective on the product. Now, on the other hand, with a product like Robinhood, I think that's actually completely different. Because if you have a bunch of people in Silicon Valley that are making Silicon Valley tech startup salaries and income, and they're like, this is the way that I live my life. I live in an apartment, for example. I, have a really high rent, and I'm not married. And I have I have like a good income from my primary job. And you're like, I want to save enough money to be able to buy a $5 or $10 cup of coffee every day, right? This is not going to map to the expectations, reality, financial circumstances of people living in the rest of the country that are having kids when they're in their 20s and 30s, right? That are looking to buy a home pretty early on in life. Like that doesn't happen in the coastal cities in this country. Like the way people behave is pretty different. And I kind of had this idea that if we wanted to build a product that resonated with a large part of the population, that the way to do it was actually to make sure that we were getting the feedback from those kinds of people and incorporating that into the product. So even from the very early days of Robinhood, we would do this thing where we would go from, here's a feature that we want to build. It could be something small. It could be something like, could be how we introduce a new product, whatever. So you got a team of people working on it. You come up with a design for it. You come up with like how you think people are going to use it. And you create a prototype of it. You create a first version of it. What we would do even in the very, very early days of the company is we would make a prototype, and I would say, okay, if we start on Monday, then either on Friday evening or on Saturday morning, let's take the prototype that we built and let's go put it in front of some customers or some hypothetical customers. And at the time, we were kind of either had just launched or had just announced the product. And so what we would do is we would go to Stanford campus and we just camp out at the coffee shop and just be like, hey, to random students, like, can we give you $50 for like 30 minutes of your time? And you just be like, here's a product or a feature. What does this do? Like, tell me what this does in your own words. And when you actually get to that point, it was pretty eye-opening because you're like, people don't see this the way that we do, right? People are in their own world. They're not paying attention. Like the amount of attention that people give to a new product or a new thing, pretty vanishing. And so if it's, for one example, right, was like zero commission stock trading. People are like, what the hell is that? They're like, is that like the interest rate on your car? And you're like, no. And then you let people ask their questions and you listen to it and you're like, oh, it's like that thing when you trade a stock and you have to pay $10 because at the time a lot of brokerages were charging $10 commissions. And this is like closer to 15 years ago at this point, or not quite that much, about 10 years ago. And you're like, holy shit, people don't know what the basic part of this is. And so we have to unpack that and see if we can explain that to people in a way that makes sense. So you kind of like realize that if you're not getting actual feedback from people that use the product who may have a pretty different financial life than you, you're going to be way off the mark. And what we ended up doing, and this was really important to me, is I would try to prioritize time every quarter, every half, to go and travel somewhere outside of the Bay Area and just interview people. And a lot of the times in those interviews, we'd have like an actual like customer research person that we'd hired leading the interviews. And I'd just be sitting in the room listening, kind of forming opinions. And people are like, who are you? I'm like, oh, I just work here. Don't mind me. It's kind of interesting, right? Because that took us to a lot of middle America.
So the whole premise was to get everyday Americans access to the stock market and crypto, correct?
Yeah.
How did you gain access to the markets?
Me?
Yeah, you. How did the app, how did Robinhood get access to the markets? Without going through all the middlemen?
Oh, I thought you were asking how I got introduced to the stock market.
No, how did Robinhood get introduced?
Yeah, so we are still a broker dealer. So we're registered as a broker dealer. And when we started the company, we worked with a lot of financial institutions on the back end. So we worked with a third-party clearing firm, right? We worked with a lot of different service providers. And so we kind of got the regulatory licenses and stuff to be able to offer this service. But we were a little startup, right? We were like 15, 20 people when we first launched the product. Like that's
Wow.
teeny tiny, right? And so we kind of had this path where we went from building the parts that we had the resources to build to over the next 5 to 10 years sort of vertically integrating key parts of the company over time. So a couple of years after we started the company, we went self-clearing. So we built our own clearinghouse, and that was a big sort of like, you know, technology build out basically.
How fast, I mean, how fast did Robinhood take off once it was introduced?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because it kind of to me always speaks to the question of product market fit. Have you heard of this before?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So product market fit is this tricky one, especially with consumer products, because when you got it, you kind of know you got it. And if you're not sure, you probably don't have it. Right. It's kind of like the sort of like sound of click almost that happens when people are like, oh, I get it. Oh, why is it? Oh, that's interesting. How does it work? Right. And I remember when we first announced the product, we had a wait list for people to be able to sign up to get it.
No kidding.
Yeah. And that wait list got real big real fast. So I want to say, see if I remember this correctly, but I want to say we had like 50 or 100,000 people on the wait list in the first month.
Holy shit.
It was really, really,
In the first month?
yeah. I'll have to go back and check, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And I remember when we first announced the product, we actually had the product, like, we kind of had this in this kind of in-between stage where we were testing that the website worked, right? And then it got picked up and posted on Reddit on the internet, and it sort of got announced, quote unquote, when it was half-baked.
No kidding.
We were actually working on redesigning the actual logo, and when it first sort of like got out there and got posted all over the internet, we actually still had the old logo, which looked like a little little rectangle with a little chart in it and a little talk box. And we like in the next week had to like kind of finalize the version of the logo that we had for many, many years until kind of recently we did a subtle redesign of it. So it was one of those moments where I built products before that did not have product market fit. And it was very fucking frustrating because you put all your heart and soul and effort into building this thing and you think it's awesome and you think it's something that people want. And if you do a good job of like introducing it to the world and announcing it, it'll get, you know, if you talk to a bunch of reporters beforehand, right? People will hear about it. Like you can get awareness for a new product, but then you see the awareness and then you see people not really sticking around. Or like they download it, they try it, and they go away. And you just look at what percentage of the people are still using your product after a month, 3 months, 6 months. And you see it's just going down and down. You're like, that does not have product market fit. Because you could get more people to use the thing, but the evidence is there is when people find it, they don't stick around. So there's no point in getting more people to find out about it or to use it, because they're just gonna go away like pretty quickly. This is also why I was like stressing that point about talking to customers and customer research, because having built a few products, you know, or at least one product before that didn't have product market fit, you're like, I really, really want this to succeed. And you ask the question very earnestly, like, what do I need to do to figure out what people actually want out of this?
What were people saying?
In terms of what they wanted from it?
Yeah, they loved it. I obviously loved it. I mean, there was, you said a 100,000 person wait list.
The interesting thing was people were like, oh, I'd try that. That's interesting. I'd try that. Or like, I'd always thought about investing in the stock market, and oh, there's no minimums, because I think at the time we didn't have any minimums for the product either. And like, oh, this is something I definitely want to try. And so you had a lot of people that had not invested before that were like, this is interesting. I'd always thought about investing. Maybe I'll give it a try. There's also some group of people out there that were actively investing before this, and they're like, oh, I see the economics. of zero commission. Let me try it for that reason. So that's kind of the interesting part about it, right? Because the thesis of the company wasn't that we were going to build a great product just for the people that invest today. The thesis was there's this generation of people that if you give them a product that they want to use, will actually start investing. Does that make sense?
It does.
So you're not really like, you're not like solving a problem that people necessarily are frustrated about. It's more that they haven't done the thing, right? Yeah. What a wild journey that has been.
I mean, it was the only product like that at the time, correct? Is it?
Zero commission? Yeah. I mean, it took a few years before the rest of the market kind of did the same thing, right? It was like 2019. There was, at the end of 2019, if I'm remembering correctly, is when a bunch of the brokerage houses all got rid of their commissions. That was,
That was triggered from you guys?
yeah,
Yeah, me too.
yeah, yeah. That was both very. It
You
felt,
revolutionized the entire market. How fucking cool does that feel?
I don't know, man. It's crazy to have made all that stuff happen. Still on the board of directors of the company, still actively involved. And to have the chance to work on something else at this stage of life also feels like a gift.
Let's move into, because you revolutionized it in more than one way. You took out the commissions, you gave everybody access. Then we move into the GameStop, AMC. What was the other one? Was there another one involved in that?
GameStop's one I remember. There were a couple of other ones too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what happened with the GameStop stuff? What was the whole scenario?
That was a wild time too. So it was kind of interesting. So this was like this was January of 21, right? And we built navigating Robinhood through COVID, like going from a company that was at a nascent stage, right? I think we were still under 1,000 people before COVID happened, or getting pretty close to it. And to go from that to having some real trials and tribulations, rapidly scaling the engineering and the technology. Because when people went home for COVID, like a lot of people were like, let me check out the stock market. Let me check out Robinhood. And that was a lot more traffic than we were planning for. And so that whole year felt like just a mad dash to keep our service, to keep up with the customer growth that we were seeing.
How many customers did you have at that point?
I don't remember. A lot. Millions. I don't remember what the number was. It was a lot, though. The other interesting thing was I had actually just had my first son. And I was kind of at this interesting point in my life where I was kind of starting to ask the question, like, what do I want to do? Because physics and science, one of these things that was in the back of my head still. Finance was something that I like loved doing, and I loved changing the industry. It wasn't something that I felt like I wanted to do my whole life.
Are you the kind of person that you go all in on something, and then once that's accomplished, you start to become bored,
A little bit,
looking
yeah.
for the next thing?
I'm very much a one-track mind person. I'm not a great multitasker. Like I'll pick one thing and I'll pulverize it, and then I'll move on to the next thing.
Do you like the journey or the achievement better?
I like the journey for sure. I actually think about this a lot right now because when I think back about the Robinhood era, right, of my life, like what as it was for me, right? it was the journey of going from having this idea, wanting to make this thing a reality. Not a lot of people believed in it, but my co-founder and I, like, we both saw it. We believed it with our mind's eye. To then figuring out the path, right? To make it real. To go from a person that didn't know much about finance, to being on the forefront of this industry. And like when you're at the forefront, I'm sure you feel this way with podcasting, right? It's like the way that you kind of take what you're doing with your own work is kind of the direction the whole industry follows, right? And it's like this feeling of mastery that I think you only get if you start from first principles. Man, that felt cool. That's the thing when I look back on that's kind of the high that I find myself chasing, is the process of going from a novice to being a master of the field. And I don't want to like toot my horn here about how much of a master of that I was, but to go from not knowing to having our company have the place that it did in the marketplace, just intuitively understanding the problem space, like intuitively understanding how to do it. Like I want to prove to myself that I can do that in other things. So that's kind of the thing that I find myself chasing. Is it the outcome? I'll be honest, like I grew up poor. Grew up very poor, right? And so at that time the money was a big motivator, right? Like I didn't want to be in poverty. I wanted to have more for my future family, right? I wanted to have a better financial outcome. I feel like I've been talking about this whole podcast, right? So I'm not going to come on here and be like, oh, well, it was, just about the accomplishment. It was the journey of a man that didn't have very much money that was trying to create his own legacy. When I got to that point, I find myself craving the uncertainty in the journey and finding myself like back in the mix of something that,
Looking for the next thing.
yeah. So that's it this time, right? The question I'm trying to ask myself is, could I do it again, right? Could I revolutionize something else? Could I figure out the path to going from being a novice at satellite engineering to being at the forefront of it? Like, I don't know how to do that. I have a lot of ideas, and I'm testing my ideas all the time, and I'm trying to get better at it. But yeah, it's like the uncertainty that really fuels me sometimes.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I don't know, but for me, like, when you hit the apex of whatever industry you're in or whatever you're doing in life, whether that's sports or business or whatever, I mean, once you hit that apex, there's an aspect that becomes boring. And it's time, I almost just said I suffer from that, but I think it's a good thing. I mean, I think it's just find something new. You want to figure out how to be the best at it. And then when you figure it out, you enjoy it for a minute, then you're on to the next thing. And so like right now, like I'm looking for the next thing. I think I found it, and I'll use,
You
what
think
I'm
you
doing.
have?
Yeah,
Can I ask what it is?
I could tell you it's in the tech space,
Okay.
but it has to do with cybersecurity.
Cool.
But this is like my next thing, and I met some amazing people that I'm going into business with, and I'm really fucking excited about it. And because like you had mentioned it, I can't remember if it was downstairs or if it was on the show, but you had talked about, you always have to have that creative outlet.
Yeah.
And like when I started this was my creative outlet. Well, like,
When it becomes the main thing, it's different.
yep, I mean, once you hit, as close to perfection as you think you can, and there's not really much left to innovate, in the particular space that I'm in, I mean, yeah, we got a new studio coming and all that stuff, but the model is here. And so it's it's not taken near the creativity that took me to build this from a small little room in my attic into what it is today, being a top 10 podcast. We've been on the number one slot, and we got the new studio and all that. That stuff's awesome. I'm really excited about it, and I love doing this still because I get to talk to people like you. But as far as the creativity aspect, it's not really here anymore, and so I fiend off creativity. Like I love it. I love disrupting things and going to new ventures because I've realized like I'm about the journey. I mean, even the Navy SEALs. Like I joined at 17, or I enlisted at 17. I was in BUDS by 18, SEAL training. Got in there, and yes, there is another level. You could go to SEAL Team 6, but I wasn't sure what that was like at the time. I mean, it was not nearly as publicized as it is now, and I was like, I mean, I became a SEAL, went to war. The journey was awesome. This isn't everything I thought it was going to be. I'm going to move on to the next thing. And then I went on and tried business, failed miserably, and real estate, and then the CIA thing popped up, which I didn't even really know was the CIA at first, that I was contracting, that I was trying out to contract for. But then I got there, and once again, like I was like, all right, well, here I am. This is a contracting for CIA. It's pretty cool. Well, what's next?
Yeah.
And now I'm finding myself in that exact same headspace again. What's next? And yeah, so it's
You,
interesting.
do you ever think about the balance between being a student and a teacher?
Yeah.
I think about that sometimes too.
What do you think about it?
I felt this kind of comes back to the question that you asked a while ago, is like what was happening during that time. I remember the balance of being a student and teacher felt off to me because we were, let's say, 1,000 people right at the company, and I found myself spending the lion's share of my time, and I think rightfully so, teaching everybody at the company what I knew, right? Teaching people how to do it in the way that we kind of thought the right way was to do it was, right? And I found myself like looking in the mirror and being like 35, 36, whatever I was at that point, 35. And I was like, I'm spending all of my time teaching people stuff. And actually, this was right around the time that I got into building cars. And I had a mentor for a while. I was like literally a student. And I remember the joy and satisfaction of learning something new from the beginning, and how quickly, how much stuff there was to learn, right? When you get to the point that you're teaching people stuff all the time, it's kind of difficult to find new things to learn. You have to be looking for it, basically, right? And if you're not careful, you can certainly end up in a situation where your shit doesn't stink, where you're like, well, I said it, therefore it's right. And you know, we all suffer from that to a certain degree.
When you hit that point, you just stop developing.
Yeah, you stop developing, right? So I did a pretty, I think, somewhat out of left field thing, which was right actually before the GameStop stuff happened, probably 2 or 3 months prior. I announced that I was actually stepping back as CEO of the company, because before, Vlad and I had been co-CEOs from beginning till right before IPO. And I was like, you know what? I want to keep doing this, but I also want to carve out a little more time for my family. And I think all this to say, when the GameStop stuff was happening, which was in January of 21, I actually just stepped back as CEO of the company a few months prior. And so it was like this.
So that was a new CEO that.
No. We had been CEOs together before,
Oh, okay.
but this was like the beginning of him as CEO by himself. Yeah.
Tough time.
So my experience there was like, holy cow, how do I help how do I help the company that I started like navigate this like black swan event that's like once in a lifetime, right? It was stressful. It was scary. It was really exhausting, right? But we navigated through it.
With prices going up on just about everything lately, saving money is essential but stressful. Trying to manage subscriptions, track spending, and cut costs can feel overwhelming. Rocket Money is here to help. If you see a subscription you no longer want, Rocket Money will help you cancel it. Their dashboard lays out your total financial picture, including bill due dates and paydays. If you've got a goal you'd like to save for, Rocket Money can analyze your accounts to find the best time each month to put extra money aside. Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you. The app automatically scans your bills to find opportunities to save and then goes to work to get you better deals. They'll even talk to customer service so you don't have to. Rocket Money's 5 million members have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, with members saving up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/SRS today. That's rocketmoney.com/SRS. rocketmoney.com/SRS. The most important action you can take today is to help protect your family's future from cyber criminals and online predators. And Bunker, that's BUNKR, can help you do just that. Bunker was developed by experts with 25 years of experience catching criminals and fighting cybercrime. They created Bunker to help protect their own families, and now they're sharing it with you. Bunker even offers a family plan. With the family plan, you get a private messenger to share messages, photos, and files with your spouse and children, connecting only with people you approve. No spam, no surveillance, no imposters, ever. You also get a password manager to help safeguard your family's online accounts, including financial, shopping, streaming, and social media. You even get a vault to help securely store important documents like photos, IDs, birth certificates, and passports. Visit their website, bunker.life/SRS, and use code SRS for 25% off your family plan today. That's bunkr.life/SRS and use code SRS for 25% off your family plan today. That's bunkr.life/SRS and use code SRS for 25% off your family plan today. So you revolutionized the entire market with no commission trading. You gave everyday Americans a platform that they can invest their money in both stocks and crypto. And I don't know all the dynamics around what went on with the GameStop AMC stuff, but it was, to my limited understanding of it, this is the everyday, this is the little man sticking it to the big man, correct? And so can you just walk me through what exactly was going on with GameStop at the time? Why it was so controversial? Because that's the other thing that you revolutionized is. Then I remember seeing all these hedge funds experts and hedge fund managers and all these fucking stock gurus, and they're like, "This is happening because these people don't know what the fuck they're doing," and it's like, well, it doesn't really matter if they know what the fuck they're doing because, like, you're gonna have to learn to adapt because they're not going anywhere. So maybe you're the one that doesn't know what the fuck you're doing anymore.
I think the best way to, this is like the version of it that makes the most sense in my mind, is there were like two freight trains that were marching down the train tracks on a collision course. The first one was this idea of democratizing finance for all, the mission behind Robinhood, right? Which is this idea that more people should have access to the markets. And the other freight train was internet meme culture. And those two collided, and it created the GameStop saga, right? It was kind of this confluence of like a lot of like memes and, you know, just like people being sort of like exaggerated versions of themselves online, and a lot of that stuff happening on Robinhood, and it was wild. Yeah.
Old. Old. I remember seeing old.
Wild, man. It was wild. And all the while I was like, yeah, it was crazy because I had literally just stepped back a few months prior, and I was like, oh my goodness. Coincidentally, 6 months later, we took the company public. I was in the middle of 2021. Yeah.
So why did it come out that people couldn't sell GameStop? They could buy it, but they couldn't sell it on Robinhood. Did the SEC get involved? What happened there?
So what happened was, it was actually there was a regulatory clearinghouse requirement around the capital that we needed to have to operate the brokerage. And actually, this was something that was going on between the registered, financial services registered people that worked at Robinhood, talking to the regulators, and they made the decision to limit I think it was to limit the more buying of that symbol because it was increasing our regulatory capital requirements. And so for a day, we put that pause on, which created this like frenzy on the internet. And it was kind of interesting because people were like batting around all these conspiracy theories, and we're like, no, we're actually just trying to work with this sort of like clearinghouse regulators to operate our business.
That's all it was?
And we ended up raising a bunch of money over the next couple of days to help support that capital requirement, right? Like that. And it's kind of interesting on this one because this one has been talked about so much. And like Dan Gallagher, for example, chief legal officer of Robinhood, also recent board member at Aetherflux, was actually one of the people that was kind of navigating Robinhood through it and spoken about it a ton over the years. But it was Black Swan.
Yeah. Wow. That was a time.
It's crazy to think that was 5 years ago.
Damn, was that 5 years ago?
It was almost five. Well, what was it? No, not quite 5 years.
4 years, right?
4.5.
2021.
Yeah, 4.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, that navigating through that dominated a lot of the next couple of the few years that followed of my life. And then probably the next big change for me was a little over a year ago leaving full-time the company I started. Just being like, I'm going to stay on the board, but I want to focus on the space idea that I've had.
How long have you had that idea?
So I had the idea of wanting to do something commercial in space for a long time. What the commercial thing was, it took me kind of a while to figure out. So this kind of is where these two companies have some shared thought process behind it because there's a common creator between the two of them, right? How many times have I said capitalism on this call or on this conversation?
Quite a few.
A lot, right? It's something that I fundamentally believe in. The reason I keep talking about it and the reason I think it's so important is that I think it has this like huge benefit for individuals and their own pursuit of life, liberty, happiness, right? And their own self-betterment. Capitalism is also an incredible force for innovation, right? And I kind of felt that one of the things that when we created Robinhood, there was this sense that there were like the access to capitalism wasn't available to everyone. And so our app literally put capitalism in the capital markets on your phone in your pocket. And look at how quickly the stock market changed.
Mm-hmm.
Happened really fast.
The name was perfect, by the way.
Yeah, the name was on point.
How did you guys come up? I mean,
That was
it's perfect.
yeah.
Like there is no better name for what you guys built them.
There were some other much worse working titles for what the company would be. Robinhood was a really good one. I think my co-founder's girlfriend, now wife, was the one that came up with that. No, but the thing that had been in the back of my head was this idea of capitalism. And growing up around the space industry, I think one thing that was very frustrating for me is I grew up in the space household and hearing about the space industry, and all of it was in the past tense. Right? The space race or whatever, it happened before either of us were born. It was over by the time we were born. And how could this be? How could this thing that was presented in all of pop culture as the future, as the frontier, we're done with it? Like, what the hell? Like, we should be having, space should be all over the place, right? Because it was one of these big technological evolutions that we thought was going to bring us to the stars as a species. And then the 90s and the 80s and the 2000s, it felt like we as a society collectively got distracted by the internet. But the internet was just so darn entertaining that like nothing was happening in space. This is kind of my worldview, right? Or my sort of caricaturization of the world. When I saw the SpaceX rockets, the original Falcon rockets landing upright, I was like, holy shit, man. I was like, is this actually happening in my lifetime? Because if it is, I need to, like, I feel compelled to want to work on this. And I'm like, I'm not quite sure how, or I'm not quite sure when, or I'm not quite sure if, but I felt this like this physical force inside of me. I'm like, I have to work on this. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, there's got to be, if we could bring more capitalism to space, more sort of ways for people to make money in space, that's how you make space a bigger part of everyday's life. And I want to say that to contrast that with what the space industry is today, or has been, is I'd say it's for the government, by the government, at government prices, which means it's not happening very quickly. It's like happening at a glacial pace. Now, if we could come up with more ways for capitalism to happen in space, meaning you can find more industrial applications for space, you're going to untether this from like the government being the sort of like primary purveyor of this to like everybody, and individuals being able to have like a bigger role in this. But you also create opportunities for people to get jobs in this industry. Because if you want to work in aerospace, what are you going to do? You're going to work at SpaceX, at Lockheed, Boeing. Like, there's got to be a lot of options and a lot of great careers. And if you look at the sort of set of commercial things that are happening in space, it's actually only a handful of industries. It's only like this is kind of also my caricaturization, but it's defense, Earth imaging / academia, and telecom. Like, those are the main industries in space. There's other stuff that's kind of on the periphery, but those are like the main big ones. And my thought process was, there's got to be something related to natural resources that we can do in space. There's got to be natural resources that we can bring from space to Earth that would create a reason for people to want to build more industrial stuff in space. And I think the light bulb went off more recently in the last couple of years when I realized that if you wanted to bring natural resources from space back to Earth, the obvious one is energy. Now, space solar power is actually kind of an old idea. It's like an old 1970s idea from NASA and the DoD, which I love. I love old ideas. The idea of zero commission stock trading is actually kind of an old idea. Like, people had been talking about this in the 80s and 90s as like a theoretical possibility. And so the idea of wanting to work on this idea of space solar power that people thought about in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, but doesn't exist in society today, it's like, man, this is checking a lot of boxes. It's an old idea, which to me says it's on strong intellectual footing for its rationale. There may not be a good solution, but the rationale is on solid footing. The reason why you'd want to do it. And it has this opportunity to increase the capitalist envelope in space. And the part that is the more recent sort of thing that made me want to do this full time is I saw a path to doing it with technology that exists today at a small enough scale that we could iterate on it. So, enter Aetherflux, the company with the mission to deliver energy to planet Earth. And I think next year is going to be a really important year, both for space energy and I think with an exclamation point for our company, because we're putting 2 satellites into space. The first one next June, so like a year from now.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Or is it? Are we in July now?
We're in July. It's
Less than
July
a year from
1st.
now. Yeah, so I gotta go fucking get to work tomorrow morning. Yeah, we're putting a first satellite up that does it.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
That's incredible. So
that's kind of a long-winded answer, but
you are launching satellites into space, which will collect solar power and beam it to Earth.
yeah.
That's fucking wild, man. That's
You know what the wildest part about this is? You don't have to have a scientific breakthrough to do this. We're doing this with technology that exists today. That's one of the core theses behind the company, right? Is to take this thing that has been science fiction for a long time and to make it science reality. And I think that there's definitely ways of doing space solar power where you can hinge it on an individual scientific breakthrough, right? You could find a version of it that makes great sense on paper, but requires $1 billion to build a test vehicle. You're like, that's not going to happen, right? What I was looking for was a path to do it that you could do it at small scale, so that you could iterate on the technology, because I think the iteration speed is really closely tied to how quickly the technology can get better. If you can only iterate on something once every 5 years, it's not going to be very good, because you're not going to get to update it but every 5 years. If on the other hand, you have an iteration cycle that's like you can update this thing every 6 months, every year, maybe even faster, then even if you start out at the wrong answer, you're going to be moving in the direction of the right answer quickly. So what is this thing called space solar power? Should I tell you about it?
yeah, please do.
Some water too. Best way to explain it, I think, is to kind of walk through the 3 things that are happening in our design and then kind of build out from there. So the first satellite that goes to space next June, again, this is like, we have to actually do a bunch of work between now and then. It's a satellite bus that we purchased from a third party called Apex. So what is a satellite bus? It's basically like the frame of the satellite, the solar panels, the way to mount it to the SpaceX rocket, all the communications antennas so that when it's in space, you can talk to it, you can orient the thing in space, you can point it in space. It's basically like it's the satellite minus what they call the payload, and the payload is the thing that's doing whatever the job is that the satellite does. So common payloads are like communications antennas, right? Or maybe a big camera to take pictures of the Earth or the atmosphere, right? So it's everything minus the payload, which is the job that it does. So we're buying that from another startup, actually. We are designing and integrating the power transmission system on the satellite, which is the laser system, all the optics for pointing it, and the final part is the ground station for receiving the power. So the satellite does, broad strokes, 2 things. First thing it does is it collects power. And so the sun is a big power plant. They're just spewing off energy from nuclear fusion, right? So you have hydrogen, helium fusion happening, heats the whole thing up, thing glows red, emits solar radiation, which our solar panels convert from photons, which are the particle of light, to electrons energized. So you go from a beam of light from the sun to an electrical current on the satellite. That's what the solar panels do. There's different kinds of solar panels you can use. You can use very expensive solar panels that have a longer lifetime and a higher efficiency, or you can go the Home Depot route. And there's a pretty interesting discussion there, and like why you might do one or the other. So let's say you've got a big, beautiful solar array on your satellite that's generating power. That power in the form of an electrical current, then you can either have that go directly to the laser system, or for this example, let's say there's a battery, which for our satellites, for the first demo missions at very least, will have a battery on it. So you take all the electrical current that the solar panels are generating and you charge up a battery on the satellite. That's step one. So we move on to step two. That's the pointing and the laser system. The pointing and the laser system is basically how you go from the charge on the battery to a beam of light that's exiting the satellite that's precisely pointed to a small spot on the ground. So what does this do? So we use something called a fiber laser, which takes the electrical current that's in the battery and it goes into a bank of photodiodes, which are basically glorified LEDs.
Okay.
Those are thin silicon wafers that when you run a current through them, they start emitting light. You take the light from tons and tons of these, you put them into fiber optics, and then inside of the fiber optic, you have what's called a gain medium, or a second stage to the laser that takes all the light that's coming out of each one of the LED, the photodiodes. These are called diode pumps in our case, where the light coming out is kind of diverging like this. And you have it go into fiber optics. When it goes through the second stage of the laser, it takes all the diverging light and it straightens it out. So then you have a fiber optic that's got a energy in it in the form of light.
Wow.
You take that beam of light and then you put it into basically a telescope, which then takes the beam of light and it projects that beam down to the ground. On the ground, at first, we're going to have a bigger array to receive the power. The array on the ground is going to be bigger simply because the actual satellite optics are smaller. Turns out if you make the optics on the satellite bigger, you can get a smaller spot on the ground. It's a physics conversation for another time. But on the ground, the architecture, and this is where the tie-in with the DoD comes in, is designed to be portable, small, and ideally of little to no strategic value if captured. So what is this receiver on the ground? We'll talk about the more beefy version of it, and then you can kind of strip this down if you needed to use it for more tactical applications. The future version we think is going to be a solar array that's 5 to 10 meters in diameter. Probably about the size of this room, right? On some sort of platform that you can gimbal so you can point it at the satellite, and a big old battery. And as the satellite's passing overhead, it's charged up, or it's charging itself up, and it's going to have these windows of time where it passes overhead, where it's over the ground station. It starts out by forming a link with the ground station. When it does, and it knows that it's got a clear path to transmit power, it'll start discharging the energy from the battery into this like laser system that'll then put that energy into the form of light. That light then that's pointed down at the solar panel on the ground, which then takes that one frequency or that small set of frequencies of light that you're passing down, and the solar panels are tuned for those frequencies of light, so you get higher efficiency. So you have this ground station that then is taking the light that's coming down from the satellite and turning it into an electrical charge again, which you can use for whatever. You can use it to power stuff.
Wow. How
It is both the power plant, which is the vision that we have for this, right? So we have one satellite that does this next year. Ideally, we have a second one that does the same thing that's on a orbit behind it, so we can test some of the more technical functionality. But the idea is that as you demonstrate this, you'll be able to get it more mature. As you are able to get it more mature, you intend to be able to make it more accurate, right? You kind of want to be able to like step up the maturity of the technology. Then you start building bigger, higher power satellites. And the way that you have more power available in space is you put more satellites up. So the idea is that over time, we're going to continue to build more and more satellites to build a constellation, an energy constellation. So imagine like Starlink for power.
wow.
That's kind of the long-term vision of it.
What do you think?
Is that, how wild does that sound?
It's pretty out there. But you know, I mentioned, you know, I'd interviewed this gentleman, Steve Quast, who was talking about this just about a month ago, and I saw a tweet that he did, and he was talking about beaming energy down and all kinds of wazoo stuff. But I was like, this guy actually seems like legit. He doesn't seem like your typical internet weirdo.
Me or him?
Him.
Oh, yeah.
And so I dug into him a little bit and brought him on, and then he started talking about how we have the technology to
Is that why you reached out to him? Because he was talking about power beaming?
Yep.
Sick.
He was talking about power beaming, he was talking about manipulating space and time, and he was talking about being able to transport yourself in a matter of seconds, basically from, you know, I don't know, Washington, D.C. to Beijing.
Really?
Yeah.
I love that power beaming is in the conversation with that stuff.
Me too.
Yeah.
And then we found you. But so what I want to ask is, I mean, with one satellite, and what do you call the ground station?
Ground station.
Just a ground
receiver station.
Receiver?
Maybe we'll come up with a more. We haven't entered the branding phase of this yet. That'll come.
Gotcha. So how much power will the ground station receive from the satellite?
For the first satellite that we're putting up, the version of this that I was kind of articulating, right, is we're trying actively to have every one of the components be things that are manufactured, meaning there's other people that have uses for these technologies that are either commercially available, or in the case of our laser system, for example, right, we're working with a third party that's taking similar technology and basically making it work better for space. So the whole idea behind this first satellite is we want to use existing supply chains, existing commercial uses for the technology, and try to package these things together so that they're more than the sum of their parts. Right? Meaning, like, you take a laser that's used for metal cutting and a satellite bus that's used for telecommunications, and you kind of like put these pieces together and make it work to do this thing that's power beaming. The reason I mention this is that there's a lot of constraints, and the power output of the first one, we kind of have pegged it at a point where we think it's power beaming, but the future systems are going to be much higher power.
Okay.
So the first one is going to do an output of about 1 kilowatt of power out of the laser system into free space. And on the ground, we think that worst case, sort of like, you know, the base case scenario is that we're able to get, you know, enough energy out of it to light maybe a light bulb, or, you know, less than 100 watts of power.
Okay.
But we think that if the system works, we should be able to get significantly more than that. So a couple 100 watts of power. So the first version of this next year is like proof of concept.
Gotcha.
Like, we're able to get enough power down with all these constraints that we have to actually generate an electrical current and use that electrical current for a demo, like a light installation, right? And I think that in and of itself, even at a lower relative power level, it kind of shows that the whole end-to-end thing is doing what we say it's going to do. After that, the goal is to start power scaling, right? Make higher power satellites and make your ground stations able to receive a lot more power. And the vision that I kind of have for this in the future is that each satellite is going to generate enough power so that if it's transmitting power to one ground station, that one ground station, whether it's one dish or several dishes that are receiving the power, will be able to generate enough power to power a small neighborhood. So
Wow.
10 homes.
Wow. Would the beam punch through clouds?
Depends on how much clouds there are.
So
Yeah. I think more likely than not, what we'll end up doing is we'll end up beaming power when we see pockets of openings in the clouds.
okay. How fast? So we're talking about with the satellites in orbit, and so it's a line of sight
Yeah.
beam, correct? Mm-hmm. So how long will the satellite be in the line of sight window?
5 to 10 minutes.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Is that enough time to drain the entire battery?
We may not want to do that actually, because it might be the case. So first of all, the idea is that similar to Starlink, right? Is as you put more and more satellites up, you start getting,
So there'll be multiple satellites beaming in at once.
well, you'll have handoff. You'll have one satellite powering a ground station. It's going to move out of the field of view and another one will take over.
Okay.
Right? So it'll be handing off from satellite to satellite. And as the first satellite moves out of the field of view of the first ground station, it's immediately going to start looking for another satellite, another ground station to start beaming power to.
Oh shit. Okay.
So the idea is many satellites, many ground stations. And for each satellite at any point in time, there is a ground station within its field of view. Because the satellites eventually are going to be operating around the clock, right? Like they get power, they need a ground station to just distribute the power to. Cool, that one's out of the line of sight. We got another one there. Start distributing there. Cool, that one's out of sight. Next one. So kind of back and forth, back and forth.
So so basically, tell me if I'm correct on this. Let's just say there's 100 ground stations. So these satellites around the globe. So these satellites will pretty much always be discharging its load of energy, correct? So it will constantly be receiving. Well, I guess not constantly, but it'll be receiving.
Depends on which orbit it's in.
And then it will almost always be beaming energy into one ground station or another, and there'll be a line of these, and so it's almost like a patrol. Just this one's beaming in here, it moves, it's beaming over there, and the next one picks up.
Yep.
And it's just a consistent orbit of that.
It's also worth mentioning there's other ways of doing this. This is the version that we think is going to pan out. The other ways of doing it are like you build one big, beautiful satellite. You build one truly large and exquisite satellite. And we're talking about putting all these things in low Earth orbit. Right? So you're talking about like 500 to 600 kilometers straight up. In the grand scheme of things, that's kind of not that far, right? Whereas geostationary or geosynchronous orbits, so the Earth is rotating, right, around its axis. If you get far enough away from the Earth, the satellite will be rotating around the Earth at the same speed that the Earth is rotating. So you'll stay over one fixed point.
Interesting.
That's 36,000 kilometers up.
Holy shit.
That's real fucking far. So another version of this architecture, and this is kind of like the version that was written about in the 70s, was instead of doing this super complicated handoff maneuvering thing, which remember in the 1970s, probably the computers weren't there to do this, right? Like in order to do this handoff stuff, you have to be able to exchange data between neighboring satellites to even be able to say, I was sending power here, I'm handing this off to you, right? Like that satellite's not just gonna like have a premonition.
Yeah.
You know, it's not gonna be remote viewing the other satellite's thoughts. Even to do something like that, you need modern computers and modern computing, right? The old version of this was, excuse me, one big, beautiful satellite in geostationary that's like maybe the size of a small city. And that thing is continuously beaming power, or nearly continuously beaming power, down to one, again, really large ground station that might be kilometers in diameter.
Yeah, but I mean, if you did that, and cloud cover in the atmosphere does dilute the beam somewhat, then I mean, then you would,
You'd be in a worse spot, right?
yeah, you
There are ways of transmitting power through the clouds and kind of ignoring them. So it actually has to do with the frequency of light that you use,
okay,
right? So actually, like when you get to microwave frequencies, like Wi-Fi frequencies and stuff like that, those will pass through the atmosphere much less disturbed than
okay,
if you're using infrared, which is what we're using for our demos. The flip side is that with infrared, we're able to use lasers, so we get like a tight beam of light, as opposed to having to focus a bunch of antennas that are diverging.
gotcha.
So if you're trying to like use microwave frequencies, for example, you would need to have an array of microwave antennas lined up so that you can send a signal to the ones at the outer ends of your array to basically noise cancel. That makes sense.
It does, it does. I mean, this way, I mean,
So all this to say, there's a way to demonstrate this that we're working towards right now. There's also the future build of how you make this an industrial or commercial thing, which we have a sense of how to do it. We're also pretty open-minded. And I think that's kind of coming back to the idea of iteration cycle, right? If you want to try to sort of sort of like will this thing into existence, right? You kind of want to find the version of it that's most likely to work. And you want to like be iterating towards it over time. Because in order for this to work, to generate enough power for it to be useful, we're going to have lots of satellites. Now, I think it's also worth mentioning like why DoD, like what's the point of the DoD and all this, right? The application that we're building for first is actually to power remote DoD installations. Like it's kind of, you could probably teach me a lesson on this, but fuel transport to the battlefield is very dangerous,
yeah,
right? Imagine just snipping that supply chain altogether, and you have this little receiver dish, and all of your power infrastructure's in orbit.
yeah. It cuts so many logistics out of the game that it's
Totally
an
different.
amazing idea, and yeah, we could have used that for the last 20 years.
Yeah. Interestingly, the DoD has been writing about this for a long time. Like this version of this architecture that we're building kind of arrived at it from a lot of conversations with a group out of DARPA. So there's a group, this guy, Dr. Paul Jaffe, who, if he's listening to it, what's up, homie? He is a research scientist, was at Naval Research Lab before, and has been working on power beaming technologies for kind of a long time. Recently moved over to DARPA and has written a lot about this. So I had been talking to him, reaching out to him as a student, right? And I think it was in those conversations that he kind of pointed us to a lot of the work that the DoD's done on this and kind of trying to articulate, because the DoD has written a lot on this, about applications for this. Like how do you use space-based solar power in this use case, right? And it's all about these small portable receivers, at least as I understand it. And there was a project or a proposal that they were working on. I think they still are, where you generate power on the ground and you relay it between several satellites and you get it down to a spot on the ground where you need it. My kind of thought on this was, if that's in service of building that receiver, it's like, yeah, you'll need the receiver, but rather than doing these hops through the atmosphere, what if you just put the power plant in orbit? So it's kind of an interesting idea, right? Because what we're proposing building is both the power plant and the power lines. Because in this model, right, you'll need like a local power grid wherever your receiver is, but
Yeah.
you're not going to need power lines from,
Space to Earth.
yeah, you're also not going to need power lines from like your home or, some big data center where some application where you're using the power to the power plant. Because that's just done directly from space.
Wow. I mean, General Petraeus said that energy is the lifeblood of our warfighting capabilities. General Mattis has asked the DoD to unleash us from the tether of fuel, and this does exactly that. I mean,
There's a long history of technologies. Sorry if I'm cutting you off. There's a long history of technologies that have started in space technologies that have started in the DoD sort of government world that have proven to be useful for people on the rest of the world. Like GPS is one comes to mind, right?
what else do you see this? Who else? Like, what other customer base is there for this other than DoD?
Yeah, I think there's actually the goal of this is to build a full energy company, right? Like a true energy company. And as you can mature the technology, as the cost of launch starts to come down with Starship or other heavy launch vehicles, as we get our shit together and our manufacturing processes are able to really squeeze down the cost of manufacturing, the medium to long-term goal for the company is going to be reduce the price of energy that we can sell. And the more we can reduce the price, the more industrial applications open up. So if you can start to get this with cost competitive with energy production on the ground, then you're really competing against terrestrial energy sources. That's kind of where I want to take this eventually, right? So whether it be receivers for our laser power beaming, in the within existing solar farms, for example, or you set up a separate like small receiver station where you're able to connect to satellites to get power from. Like I imagine this to be a new energy grid and one that augments the copper cables and lines on the ground in the same way that Starlink is, complementing all the fiber optic telecommunications infrastructure on the ground. So I think that's kind of the goal is to get the cost down. As you get the cost down, you can start being cost competitive with more use cases.
Do you see this becoming more of a, how do I say this, more of a decentralized grid?
I would love that for that to happen. Yeah, that's kind of the vision for it. I like to punctuate a very serious conversation with these gummies. They're great. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Curious, any interesting stories from being deployed around energy infrastructure that you've had, like fuel transits, like any sort of dicey stuff that happened.
Well, I mean, I'm not too into logistics. I mean, with my background, I'm more of a war fighter, and so the logistics are all, pretty much taken care of for us. But a lot of times, we would be, especially with, well, actually both with SEAL teams and contracting for CIA. I mean, we're not really near most of the time, at least where I like to go, because I like the action. We're not near like a big base like Bagram or Kandahar or Baghdad, and we're pushed out, and that could be in something that's just a safe house where you're sucking off the local energy grid, which a lot of those places were very unstable, especially Yemen. I mean, the power and the internet would just go out all the time.
Interesting.
And
Were there diesel generators around?
yeah, it depends. If you're at a house, you're likely not going to have a diesel generator because that would stand out. The whole purpose of having a safe house is to blend in with the local population, right?
Yeah.
So you couldn't have that.
That's what you mean by safe house. Okay.
That's what I mean by safe. It's literally just a house in a neighborhood that
Happens to be safe.
that yeah, maybe, but
Kind of safe.
yeah, you'd have them spread out throughout the city, and everybody there on the ground knows, hey, there's a safe house, there's a safe house, there's a safe house, and it could be an extract point or a safe haven, or you could be operating out of a safe house, which is what we did the majority of the time. And so you're using local energy. Now, if you're at like a forward operating base, like a SEAL platoon is there, or a small element, then yeah, you're running off diesel generators, and so what can happen with the logistics of that? I mean, one, it's expensive, two, I mean, convoys were getting hit all over in Iraq and Afghanistan. So if your fuel gets hit, blown up by an IED, well then you're shit out of luck, buddy.
Yeah.
You're not getting any energy. And so with something like this, I mean, it would 110% be a game changer right off the bat.
Did you ever have to lug solar panels into the field?
Or no,
Do you know people that did?
no. Lots of communications equipment and
Got it.
antennas and shit like that, but not solar panels.
How would you charge that stuff up if it ran on was it battery based?
Yes.
What happens if it runs out of batteries?
You always got extras.
Okay, you just carry more batteries.
Yep.
Ah,
Everybody carries batteries.
That's wild. Yeah, that makes sense though. I've heard some people talking about stories of carrying like a solar ruck pack into the field.
Well, like I said, I haven't been out there in 10 years. So
Okay.
this year is 10 years since my last deployment. So who knows what the hell they're running nowadays. But in my day, we had batteries called 5590s that powered all the communications equipment.
Cool.
And so everybody would have, I mean, batteries are like ammo for us, because if you lose communications, then you're dead. And
Yeah.
but I'm sure they probably have some type of solar panels they're carrying around now. Wouldn't surprise me one bit.
It's come up a couple of times in my research, but it's hard to tell how prevalent that stuff is.
Yeah. Well, if you need connections, I can get you connected to the modern day warfighter. They'll tell you all about it.
Yeah.
So, but
I'll probably take you up on that at some point.
no problem. Wow. How many satellites do you think it would take to power like a small decentralized grid, like the size of a small town, maybe 15, 20,000 people?
Tough to say. I'd have to do some back of the envelope math on it. I think also the question that I kind of have right now is how big to make each one of the satellites versus whether to just make more of them. Right? Because I actually think there's probably an advantage in making them smaller because each one becomes less strategically important. Each one, if there's a failure of a component, kind of becomes more throwaway. Yeah, I'd have to do some back of the envelope to get a reasonable answer. But I think it's also going to be if you go the constellation route with this, as much as you're providing power for one location, you're also starting to build capacity to provide power pretty much anywhere in the globe. Because you'll have some satellites that are over the place that you want to deliver the power, but a lot of the times they're going to be orbiting back around the Earth to get back to that spot. Or they're orbiting around the Earth and maybe just missing that spot altogether. But they'll catch it in 2 days when the other satellites won't be over it.
Gotcha.
Right? So it's actually...
How will you make the determination of whether to go bigger or more?
That's a great question. I think it's probably going to be trial and error. It's probably going to be like, where can we power scale it until some components start becoming really difficult to power scale, right? And like what that is, it could be something small, it could be something big. And I think it'll also be a trade-off of how to package them into the satellite or into the rocket, right? Because Starship is huge. And each one of those, depending on how big the satellites are, you might be able to put like 100 or 200 of them in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
No shit. 100 to 200 satellites in
Starship.
one lift.
Yeah. Some very early modeling we did, we kind of thought that we could get those ballpark of numbers.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of the part about this. It was like, how is this ever going to become big? How are you ever going to get to like proper constellation density? Or like, how do you get to the same constellation size as Starlink, right? Well, Starship kind of changes that equation, right? So if it's 100, let's just say for the sake of this argument, it's 100 satellites per Starship, right? And let's say that there's 7,000 starships, or 7,000 Starlink satellites in space, roughly speaking. Let's just say for the sake of argument, that's like 70 launches.
Damn.
And if you think about what the requirements are going to be, the point I'm trying to get here is in order for Starship to be able to do something like the Mars mission, they're going to have to build this thing for rapid reuse. Like they're going to have to hit those windows of time to launch to get from Earth to Mars, for example, right? Mm-hmm. There's going to be a time crunch in which they're going to need to put lots of payloads into orbit, which means that during those times, more, I haven't looked at their flight plan, so I'm kind of guessing how this is going to work. But I'd imagine that there's going to be a period of intense launching where they have to do tons and tons and tons of launches to get the payload in orbit, to assemble whatever stuff they need to do to then send it to Mars. If they're building for that kind of capacity and like rapid reuse, when you're not trying to go to Mars, there's going to be stuff that you have the ability to put into space, right? Mm-hmm. There's the launch capacity. Maybe it's not the first year that Starship goes live. Eventually, the launch capacity is going to be available to be able to do missions like this.
Mm-hmm. How long do you think these satellites will last? I mean, there's no weather elements up there. What?
In low Earth orbit, things deorbit naturally.
Okay.
There's enough drag up there that they'll just fall back down, which is actually probably fine. So I think 10 years or so would be kind of the target for the lifespan for satellite.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting on the satellite design. We talked about this a little bit in the beginning, right? It's like, do you use cheaper, less efficient components or more expensive, higher efficiency components? And the answer is like, it's not totally clear. Like you actually kind of have to do the trade-off to figure it out. I bring this up because a lot of the times the questions are around efficiency, where because the supply is free, it's actually the thing that matters more is like, what are the overall economics, which may actually be better with less efficient components.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What am I not asking I should be?
Man, I don't know. We've talked about a lot of stuff.
With the satellites.
Oh, with the satellites, right. That's not where my head was going. Let me think. What else is the satellites?
How small do you think these receivers can get?
I think 5 to 10 meters in diameter is kind of what, I mean, look, we might end up being able, if we get to that, we might end up shooting for smaller. We might end up shooting for like 2.5 meter spot on the ground.
Do you see this overpowering individual homes?
I think it could, yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of, there's a lot of steps between this and that. But like we're able to use Starlink to power individual homes for internet. Like I would like to be able to do that, yeah. I think at the very least there might be a case for having receivers local to neighborhoods if you didn't want to put them like actually on top of a roof, for example.
I mean, we're on the cutting edge of this, so I mean, it's I don't know. Could it beam it to a car while driving? Like, could this revolutionize everything in energy?
Yeah. So here's something you could do: is you could beam it to moving platforms. You could beam it to boats,
Ships.
You could beam it to ships. You could possibly
A ship could hold a 5 to 10 meter wide receiver.
Many of them if it wanted to. Right. And you could end up in a situation where you're able to electrify some of these things that batteries are never going to be able to do, right?
Man, that's fucking cool, man.
Yeah, imagine a fleet of satellites when they're flying over the Pacific, for example.
Dedicated to a fleet of naval ships.
Yeah, or they switch from providing power to like some industrial application to now they're over the Pacific and now they're powering ships. And then they're back over land and they're powering industrial applications. Like
That's amazing, man. Like what you're doing is just it's incredible.
This is the brave new world, man. And I think look, this is really hard, right? Like this, what we're talking about doing here, it's not a foregone conclusion that this is going to happen. Like it's a tremendously challenging technical problem ahead of us. But the point I'm trying to get at here is like, I think people like me in society that have the desire to do stuff like this, that have the experience and the means to make it happen. Like, I think it's on us to try stuff like this, right? Like it's
awesome.
It's a higher calling, right? Like you gotta, if you have the ability to like make this contribution to the technical landscape of humanity. And I'm 40, right? Like I have years ahead of me, knock on wood. Yeah. It's like, it's seeing if you can will this into existence.
Well, seems like you're doing a damn good job, man. Last question.
Yeah.
If you had 3 people to see on this show, who would they be?
3 people. I'm assuming you're asking for people that are alive today.
Yeah.
I mean, this is maybe should have come up with a better answer to this. You've had Trump on, which I think is awesome. I'm trying to think of non-obvious ones because the obvious one would be Elon Musk. Would you have on somebody like Kamala Harris?
I tried to get her.
Did you?
Yeah, we were in touch with her camp. She was going to do it.
I think that would be fascinating.
I don't know if she'll do it now, but she was going to do it, and then for one reason or another, it just fell off, and they decided not to come. But I really wanted that interview.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, I think that would have been huge. I think it would have been interesting to see because Trump did so many of these interviews, right? To get like a real apples to apples comparison.
Yeah.
Who else would be interesting? I don't know, I'm kind of blanking. Let me think about it a little bit.
All right. No worries. Well, man, I'm so glad we met.
Yeah.
What a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time and coming to Tennessee and sitting down and describing what you're doing and what you have done and all the rabbit holes we went down, and I hope to see you again.
Likewise, my friend.
Perfect. Best of luck. No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.